Chapter 849. Tang Zheng's meaningful smile made the 100 Transformations Star-Lord's hair stand on end. That was because he really couldn't figure out what had happened to Tang Zheng. Although Tang Zheng still looked like the old Tang Zheng, the existence of the inner demons was still unknown. If the inner demons hadn't been destroyed, then he would be in danger. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord had already experienced the power of the inner demons. He was both angry and afraid of this fellow. Tang Zheng walked step by step towards the 100 Transformations Star-Lord. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord retreated in panic and shouted, "Stop, don't come any closer." Tang Zheng smiled evilly and said, "Why, are you afraid? Don't come any closer." The 100 Transformations Star-Lord roared with all his might. "Hehe, do you think I'll let you leave if I don't come any closer? My inner demons want to unify the world, and I still need a pawn like you. Once I control you, you can charge into the enemy lines for me." Tang Zheng sneered. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord knew very well what it felt like to have his fate in the hands of others. Naturally, he wasn't willing to end up like this. He had just suffered a lot at the hands of the inner demons. Seeing Tang Zheng like this, he naturally didn't dare to suspect that Tang Zheng wasn't the inner demons. He had already concluded that the inner demons must have controlled Tang Zheng. After all, even with his cultivation, he couldn't contend against the inner demons, let alone a small Tang Zheng. Seeing Tang Zheng approaching, the 100 Transformations Star-Lord was burning with anxiety. He roared, "I won't let you succeed." He actually didn't attack Tang Zheng. Instead, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and rushed into the sky. He stomped on the cliff a few times and fled towards the top of the canyon at lightning speed. "Stop right there!" Tang Zheng roared, scaring the 100 Transformations Star-Lord so much that he almost slipped and fell. Bang! With a loud bang, the entire canyon shook violently. The giant actually used both hands to grab onto the cliff and used all 4 limbs to climb out of the canyon. Seeing that the multiform Star-Lord and the giant had disappeared from the sky above the canyon, the corners of Tang Zheng's mouth curled into a smug smile. "Hee." Tang Zheng laughed in a low voice. This multiform Star-Lord was really scared out of his wits by the inner demons. With just a few words, he actually managed to scare him into running away. In fact, although the inner demons were still in Tang Zheng's body, the inner demons' abilities were restrained and could not be used at all. Unless he controlled Tang Zheng's body, only then could he use that terrifying strength again. The 100 Change Star Sovereign did not know this at all, which was why he was scared away. In fact, Tang Zheng's action was not entirely a prank. He did it because he saw the fatigue on the Empyrean Fairy's face. The Empyrean Fairy had been tortured by the inner demons and had used up a lot of her power. The remnant soul in Tian Chan's body was also weakening, and his strength had decreased sharply. Although the 100 Transformations Star-Lord's strength had decreased greatly, his team was obviously not strong enough. Moreover, the opponent had the giant. Therefore, to be safe, he did not want to fight the 100 Transformations Star-Lord directly for the time being. There were too many unknowns. He did not want anything to happen to his people. Therefore, he had to intimidate the 100 Transformations Star-Lord. However, the 100 Transformations Star-Lord was also a smart person. As long as he had time, he would definitely figure out the trick. By then, he would understand that he had been fooled by Tang Zheng. However, by then, everyone would have recovered their power, and it would not be easy for him to deal with Tang Zheng. "Humph, young man, you are quite smart. You used my name to scare this person away," the inner demons said with mixed feelings. Tang Zheng smiled and said, "That's because he is too stupid. You are smart enough, but Caillou's remnant soul has been hiding in your body for so long, and you did not even notice it. You are really too smart," the inner demons mocked. Tang Zheng was furious and said, "Caillou, come out and tell me clearly. What is your purpose in hiding in my body? Isn't it obvious? Once the time is up, you will be reborn," the inner demons said. Caillou immediately retorted, "Inner demons, will anyone believe your words? Tang Zheng, think about it yourself. Did I do anything bad in your body? I even helped you subdue the sword spirit and defeated the sword god. Have you forgotten? If I wanted to harm you, why would I take the risk to help you? Tang Zheng was moved. Kaiyu had indeed helped him a lot. Haha, what's so hard to explain? He was protecting this body, not your life. Young man, you can't be so easily fooled by him, right? The inner demons directly exposed him. Kaiyu was furious. Inner demons, no one will think you are mute if you don't talk. Nonsense. Seeing that the two of them were at a loss for words, Tang Zheng frowned. He did not expect them to analyze anything useful from their conversation. The others had already surrounded them, their eyes filled with vigilance. After all, he had just called himself the inner demons. They could not help but be worried. Are you Tang Zheng or the inner demons? The Empyrean fairy asked. Of course I am Tang Zheng. Why don't you recognize me? Tang Zheng smiled and said. Then why did you say that you are the inner demons? Of course it was to scare the 100 Faces Star Sovereign. He made us so scared. How could we let go of such a good opportunity to scare him? Don't doubt Master. He is Master, not the inner demons. Linger knows. Linger said as she hugged Tang Zheng's arm. Xiao Bai also happily jumped onto Tang Zheng's shoulder. He held his head and kept rubbing it, turning his hair into a chicken coop. Tang Zheng grabbed Xiao Bai and pretended to be angry. Stop. However, Little White grinned, and actually did not give up, causing Tang Zheng to be helpless. Tian Chanzi had been looking at Tang Zheng with a scrutinizing gaze. After a long while, he said, You are indeed not the inner demons. What about the inner demons? Did you really destroy them? Tian Chanzi's expression was a little excited. The inner demons have existed for so many years. No one has ever been able to destroy them. I did not expect them to die in your hands. You are wrong. The inner demons are not dead. Tang Zheng said. Not dead. Tian Chanzi was shocked. How can he not be dead? If he is not dead, then why are you not under his control? Tang Zheng hesitated. Since the inner demons were imprisoned here by Kaiyu and the Yellow Emperor, then the remnant soul in Tian Chanzi's body was probably related to Kaiyu. So, he said directly, because I have Kaiyu's remnant soul in my body. The two of them fought against each other, and no one could do anything to the other. Naturally, it led to this situation. Kaiyu. Tian Chanzi's voice suddenly raised a few octaves. You mean Kaiyu is not dead? Tang Zheng saw him so excited and was about to say something. However, Kaiyu shouted in his body, Tang Zheng, why are you telling him this? Do you know who he is? Who is he? Tang Zheng was confused. This remnant soul was deliberately left on the bronze coffin by the Yellow Emperor, so it is the remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor. He is my sworn enemy. If he hears that I am not dead, how will he punish you? Kaiyu said bitterly. Tang Zheng's head thumped. The Yellow Emperor and Kaiyu were sworn enemies. Since the Yellow Emperor knew that Kaiyu was not dead, he would not let him go. Sure enough, Tian Chanzi's eyes had changed. He was looking at Tang Zheng with a murderous look. Kaiyu is not dead. I will never let him live in this world and bring disaster to the world. Tian Chanzi roared. He slapped Tang Zheng with his palm. At such a close distance, even Tang Zheng himself could not resist, let alone the others. He did not expect Tian Chanzi to attack him. For a moment, the situation was very critical. Kaiyu was so angry that he wanted to stomp his feet. He cursed, Tang Zheng, you are really stupid. Yellow Emperor, even if I, Kaiyu, die, I will never forgive you. However, no matter how hard Kaiyu shouted, there was nothing he could do. Stop. An angry roar burst out from Heaven Monk's mouth, only to see his palm steadily stopping in front of Tang Zheng's forehead. The wind from his palm blew at Tang Zheng's face, causing Tang Zheng's face to hurt. Tang Zheng was shocked. He quickly took a few steps back to avoid Tian Chanzi. As for the shout just now, he also heard it clearly. That was the real Tian Chanzi, not the remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor. Obviously, at the critical moment, Tian Chanzi tried his best to control his body and save Tang Zheng's life. I won't allow you to hurt Tang Zheng, Tian Chanzi roared hysterically. Tian Chanzi, you dare to resist me? The remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor was furious. Page, this is my body. I make the decisions. No matter who you are not qualified to make the decisions, let alone use my hands to hurt Tang Zheng. Tian Chanzi was aggressive. Kaiyu chuckled. I didn't expect Tian Chanzi to save your life at the critical moment. Now you don't have to worry anymore. The remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor is already at the end of its tether and is rapidly weakening. Tian Chanzi can gradually control the body. As time passes, the remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor will only become weaker and weaker. Then there is nothing to worry about. Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. However, looking at Tian Chanzi talking to himself, he felt his heart ache. Shut up. If you dare to help Kaiyu, I'll destroy your body. The remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor threatened. Even if you destroy my body, I won't let you succeed. Tian Chanzi would rather die than submit. The two of them argued back and forth. Tian Chanzi's body trembled uncontrollably. It was obvious that he was in great pain. His own soul was fighting with the soul of the Yellow Emperor. Kaiyu, do you have any way to help Tian Chanzi? Tang Zheng asked anxiously. Kaiyu didn't care and said, why are you worried about him? He won't die. As for the remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor, he's dead for sure. The remnant soul of the Yellow Emperor is closely related to the bronze coffin. As soon as the bronze coffin is opened, his remnant soul will quickly weaken. The more time passes, the weaker his remnant soul will become. In the end, his soul will scatter. All you need to do is wait. Looking at Tian Chanzi, who had fallen to the ground and was constantly twitching, and even talking to himself, Tang Zheng was in great pain. He wanted to help, but didn't know how. As time passed by, Tian Chanzi's struggles gradually subsided. Finally, his legs kicked, and he stopped moving. Tang Zheng was stunned. Could it be that he was dead? Chapter 850. Tian Chanzi slowly opened his eyes, relaxed his eyebrows, and grinned. Silly boy, even if you wish for me to die, I won't die. My life is big. He stretched his muscles and bones, and sure enough, he was fine. He was full of energy. Seeing this familiar smile, Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. He punched Tian Chanzi's shoulder and said, it's good that you're not dead, it's good that you're not dead. Seeing how concerned you are about me, you can't bear for me to die, right? Tian Chanzi rolled his eyes and laughed strangely. I just can't bear for you to die. I still have a lot of things for you to do. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes. How heartless. Tian Chanzi crawled up, patted his clothes, and said, damn it, if I, Tian Chanzi, was not strong enough, wouldn't I have been taken away by that remnant soul? This body of mine was obtained with great difficulty, how can I let him off so easily? You've been missing for a while. What happened? Why did you come to the prehistoric heavenly tomb? Tang Zheng asked. Sigh, it's a long story. Tian Chanzi sighed, and spoke tirelessly. It turned out that when he had chased all the way to the island nation, he had discovered that the strange phenomenon in the sky was caused by the mountain river blood sacrifice array. Furthermore, this was led by the 100 Transformations Star Lord, and it had already been completed. The demon clan had already returned, and he was powerless to reverse the situation. However, according to his observations, there were not many demon clan-s who had returned, so he was relieved. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, he had been tracking the demon clan and discovered that they had actually split into two groups. One group directly took the ship back to Huashia with great fanfare, and the other group quietly returned to Nanyang. After that, they took a big detour and entered Huashia from the southwest border, and directly snuck into the 10,000 huge mountains. Tian Chanzi followed them all the way. He knew that the 100 Faces Star Sovereign had a deep meaning behind his actions. The demons on the ships were there to attract the enemy's attention. The most important thing was the people returning to the 100,000 mountains. When the Heaven Monk realized that they were actually plotting something, he observed them from afar. Unexpectedly, one day, he did not know what the 100 Transformation Star Lord did, but something actually broke out of the ground from the graves in the prehistoric heavenly tomb. That battle was extremely huge, and it caused a huge tremor between heaven and earth, like an earthquake. The tremors detected by the outside world were caused by this. Tian Chanzi discovered that the things that broke out of the ground were actually sets of white bones. It was obvious that they were left behind after death, and were the experts from the ancient times who were buried in the prehistoric heavenly tomb. But what surprised Tian Chanzi the most was that one of the targets was actually a giant with flesh and blood. Tian Chanzi had lived for more than 1,000 years, but he had never heard of or seen such a giant. He was really shocked. The giant clan had long disappeared without a trace in the long river of history. Tian Chanzi naturally did not know, but he understood that all of this was troublesome. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign and the other demon clan were extremely excited, as if they had a secret technique to control these white bones and giants. In addition, there were also those demonic beasts. Under the orders of the 100 Faces Star Sovereign, the white bones first landed in the canyon, followed by the demonic beasts. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign and the demon clan hearing the movement at the bottom of the canyon, Tian Chanzi understood that something must have happened below. In order to investigate, he did not hesitate to chase down to the bottom of the valley. He just happened to see the 100 Faces Star Sovereign and the others tying a chain to a huge bronze coffin, trying to pull it up from the canyon. Unexpectedly, at this time, a sudden change occurred. A black aura rose from the bronze coffin, and when the nearby demonic beasts and demon clan were touched by the black aura, they immediately fell to the ground and died. The crowd screamed and fled in all directions. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign seemed to have a plan, and ordered White Bones to attack again. It seemed that White Bones could fight against the black aura, and the two sides were entangled. At this time, the 100 Faces Star Sovereign ordered the other demonic beasts to tie the chain to the huge bronze coffin, and was about to pull it up directly. Tian Chanzi had been hiding in the dark to observe. He also wanted to know what was hidden in the huge bronze coffin that could make the 100 Faces Star Sovereign and the demon clan move so many people. The canyon was almost full of the 100 Faces Star Sovereign's men. Although Tian Chanzi hid well, when the demonic beasts climbed up the cliff, he was still exposed. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign's eyes immediately swept over, and he shouted, "It's you," and was about to attack. Tian Chanzi knew that he was no match for the 100 Faces Star Sovereign, and it was impossible for him to escape now. His eyes locked onto the huge bronze coffin, and he made up his mind. Since he was going to die anyway, he would go and see what was in the huge bronze coffin that made the 100 Faces Star Sovereign value it so much. Perhaps he could destroy it before he died, so that the 100 Faces Star Sovereign would not succeed. When he flew to the top of the huge bronze coffin and was about to open the lid, he felt a mysterious power rush into his brain. Then, he was controlled. However, he was still conscious, but he was unable to control his body. He could clearly feel that his strength was rising, and finally reached a level that he could not reach. Then, he uncontrollably fought the 100 Faces Star Sovereign, and found that he was actually a match for him. Later, when Tang Zheng and the others arrived and opened the huge bronze coffin, the power of the remnant soul that controlled his body decreased sharply. What about the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul? Was it destroyed by you? Tang Zheng asked with concern. Tian Chanzi scratched his head, and said non-committally, "It should have been destroyed. I can no longer feel his existence." "What do you mean by should have been destroyed?" Tang Zheng rolled his eyes speechlessly. "He is so strong, how would I know if he was truly destroyed? In any case, I have already regained control of my body, and I can no longer feel his existence. Everything is over, so you don't need to worry," Tian Chanzi said casually. Tang Zheng looked at him deeply, and in the end, he nodded helplessly. I also have to thank the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul. Although he is no longer here, and my cultivation has decreased a lot from my previous peak, it is still much higher than before. Now, I am already at the 9th stage of the Yuanying realm, and am only a step away from the deity transformation realm," Tian Chanzi said excitedly. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. Although it was dangerous, he felt that it was extremely worth it. If it was any other cultivator, they would most likely clamor for this opportunity. Of course, if the huge bronze coffin had not been opened, then the Yellow Emperor's remnant soul would not have been damaged. Then, whether or not Tian Chanzi would have been able to regain control of his body was unknown. In short, this was Tian Chanzi's opportunity. When Tang Zheng heard this, he was happy for him, and said, "This is your compensation. Your strength has increased greatly, so when we face the 100 Transformation Starlord in the future, we will have a greater chance of victory. Although the Empyrean Fairy and the 100 Transformation Starlord had not yet fought, Tang Zheng believed that the Empyrean Fairy would definitely not lose to the 100 Transformation Starlord, so their strength was guaranteed. Tian Chanzi nodded, and looked at Tang Zheng worriedly, and said, "The inner demons and Kai you are in your body at the same time. Will your body be okay?" Tang Zheng also thought it through. Since he could not chase away the two of them, there was no need to be entangled in this matter. Moreover, there were two of them who could balance each other. If there was only one, then it would be terrible, and he would have to be on guard against him at all times. However, Tang Zheng also felt that he was unlucky, as if he had to deal with this kind of thing. Back then, it was Tian Chanzi who lived in his body, and now it was Kaiyu and the inner demons. Moreover, one was more powerful than the other. As for whether the future would be a blessing or a disaster, he had no way to predict it for the time being. He could only block soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir, and take one step at a time. The baleful yin qi here is very strong. Let's leave this place. Tian Chanzi looked at the canyon where the yin qi was raging and urged. Tang Zheng was about to say that they should leave, but the war soul in his hand began to buzz and tremble, and the sword's cry did not stop. "Master, this baleful yin qi is useful to me," the sword spirit suddenly said. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that the war soul sword was originally named after the war soul. The war soul was a baleful yin qi, so naturally, the war soul sword also contained an extremely strong baleful yin qi. Later on, when the war soul and the sword soul fused, the baleful yin qi became even stronger. However, Tang Zheng did not go to many places with dense baleful yin qi. The baleful yin qi in this canyon could actually suppress and imprison the inner demons. It could be seen how powerful it was. "Alright, then you can absorb this baleful yin qi." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He knew that if the war soul sword absorbed it, its quality would definitely improve. The war soul sword was already a heaven-level magical wave, but he didn't know what it would be like if it was upgraded. "Everyone, wait a moment. The baleful yin qi here is so strong. If an ordinary person came here, they would definitely suffer. Why don't I use the war soul sword to absorb it?" After Tang Zheng finished speaking, he threw the war soul sword into the air and shouted, "Go." The war soul sword floated in the air. Immediately, a strong suction force came from the war soul sword. In an instant, a whirlpool appeared on the war soul sword. The aura of the heaven and earth was in chaos. The evil wind roared and all the baleful yin qi surged in. In an instant, the war soul sword's light increased greatly. The sword light was tens of thousands of feet long, illuminating the originally dark canyon as bright as day. Su su su. Streams of sword qi danced in all directions, leaving deep marks on the cliffs of the canyon after being struck by the sword qi. After a long time, all of this calmed down. The air in the canyon was refreshed. Without the baleful yin qi, it actually seemed a little warm. Whiz. With a flash of sword light, the war soul sword flew back into Tang Zheng's hands. Tang Zheng looked at it carefully. There was actually a strange symbol on the war soul sword. This symbol was curved and curved, as if it had a profound meaning. Tang Zheng looked at it and actually couldn't understand it. "What is this?" The others all came over and stared at the symbol, puzzled. Tian Chanzi pinched his chin and muttered to himself for a long time, "I have never seen this symbol before. Did the war soul sword not have it before?" Tang Zheng firmly shook his head. The war soul sword was the magic treasure that had accompanied him the longest. He knew every single detail about it like the back of his hand. Tang Zheng scratched his head, not knowing what this mysterious symbol represented. It must have been a change after absorbing so much baleful yin qi. "Sword spirit, do you know what this means?" Tang Zheng had an idea and directly asked the sword spirit. Chapter 851. The sword spirit's voice sounded, "Master, I feel that the war soul sword has undergone a qualitative change. As for the mysterious symbol, it seems to contain some kind of mysterious power that even I am unable to completely understand." Tang Zheng was stunned, even the sword spirit was unable to understand it. What did that mean? As for the quality of the war soul sword, Tang Zheng could clearly feel that it had increased by a large amount. Tang Zheng, your war soul sword has already left its mortal body and transcended into a saint. Kaiyu's voice suddenly sounded. Transcendence into a saint. Tang Zheng was shocked. He had never heard of these words before. What did they mean? There are thousands of time weapon magic treasures, but there are corresponding ranks. In the past, you only understood the ranks of mortal-grade magic treasures, such as Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow. However, there are other ranks of magic treasures, breaking away from the mortal body and transcending into a saint. Then the magic treasure will become a holy artifact, and at this time, the magic treasure will become even more powerful. But there is one thing, all holy artifacts must have an artifact spirit. Your war soul sword has a sword spirit. This is the key to advancing to a holy artifact. It seemed that in order to restore a good impression, Kaiyu spoke in detail. There are still many ranks of holy artifacts, and there are a total of 6 grades. Grade 1 is the lowest, and Grade 6 is the best. Your war soul sword has just crossed the threshold of Grade 1 holy artifact. Grade 1 holy artifact. Tang Zheng could not help but stroke the war soul sword. He had never thought that there would be a new level above the heaven grade magic treasure. For a moment, he was filled with emotions. In ancient times, there were many holy artifacts, but after the Battle of Zhuolu, the experts fell, and the number of holy artifacts gradually decreased. Especially in magic treasures, it was extremely difficult for an artifact spirit to appear, which was the key to restricting the appearance of holy artifacts. In ancient times, the weapon refiners refined magic treasures with artifact spirits, directly becoming holy artifacts. Later on, there were more and more weapon refiners, and there were only mortal-grade magic treasures left in the world. There were very few holy artifacts. Tang Zheng nodded. No wonder Tian Chanzi did not know about the holy artifact, and never told me about it. It turns out that the holy artifact had already gradually disappeared in the long river of history. Actually, you already possess a sacred artifact. You just didn't know about it, Kaiyu said. Tang Zheng was startled. He suddenly had an idea, and said, "You mean the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows?" These were the only 2 magic treasures he had on him that he had never been able to see through. Smart. These 2 magic treasures are the divine weapons of Hu Yi from ancient times. They are both sacred artifacts. However, you are temporarily unable to communicate with their artifact spirits, so you have yet to fully unleash their profundities. Tang Zheng's heart could not help but thump. He had always relied heavily on the heaven-shocking bow and the sun-shooting arrows, but it turned out that he had not fully unleashed their power. If he had truly unleashed their full power, what kind of scene would that be? He really couldn't imagine. Then, are there any other grades above sacred artifacts? Tang Zheng asked. He had learned his lesson. He had always thought that the heaven-level magic treasure was the limit. He didn't expect himself to be a frog at the bottom of a well. I'll leave this for you to discover. It's too early for you to know now. It will only increase your frustration and disturb your mind. It's not beneficial to your cultivation. Kaiyu said, obviously not wanting to tell him. Tang Zheng frowned, and said, "You don't want to tell me, right? Do you have any other unknown motives?" He no longer trusted Kaiyu, so of course he wouldn't completely believe his words. "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. I don't want to say any more," Kaiyu said helplessly. "Ha ha ha, Kaiyu, how does it feel to eat your own medicine?" The inner demons suddenly laughed out loud. "Young man, Kaiyu did not lie to you this time. It is indeed not a good thing for you to know in advance. It is not beneficial to your cultivation." Do I need you to say good things for me?" Kaiyu didn't appreciate it at all. "Of course I don't want to say good things for you. I just don't want to trouble you." The inner demons snorted and retorted. Tang Zheng let out a sigh of relief. The inner demons and Kaiyu's words were compared to each other. Kaiyu really didn't lie. He couldn't help but feel gratified. These 2 souls kept each other in check and balance, which was indeed beneficial to him. Otherwise, if he listened to one side, he wouldn't even know if he was dragged into a ditch. Tang Zheng was talking with the 2 souls, but he didn't notice that the Empyrean fairy was staring at the war spirit sword with a complicated expression. She muttered to herself, "You actually upgraded a magic treasure to a sacred artifact. It's really inconceivable. Tang Zheng suddenly heard this and stared at the Empyrean fairy as if he had just woken up from a dream. He asked, "You also know about the sacred artifact?" The Empyrean fairy nodded. "Of course I know." Tang Zheng was delighted and patted his head. He was really too stupid. The Empyrean fairy was also an ancient person and had seen a lot. He was afraid that she was even more knowledgeable than Tian Chanzi. He could ask her these questions. Were there a lot of sacred artifacts in ancient times? The Empyrean fairy curled her lips and said, "Do you think sacred artifacts are cabbages? How could there be a lot? When I was still young, there were already not many sacred tools. Only those with high statuses and powerful strength could be equipped with them. It was impossible for ordinary people to possess sacred tools. Otherwise, they would be met with a fatal disaster. You should understand the principle of a man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime, right?" Tang Zheng nodded. "Of course I understand." "Hey, excuse me, what is a sacred artifact? You are confusing me." Tian Chanzi hurriedly shouted with a suspicious face. "Tian Chanzi, you didn't have a sacred artifact at that time, right? I've never heard of it." Tian Chanzi shook his head. "This is very clear. Sacred artifacts gradually decreased in the long river of history until they finally disappeared. Even if one or two artifacts were passed down occasionally, people didn't know that they were sacred artifacts. For example, Tian Chanzi, you only had 4 magic artifacts at that time: heaven, earth, black, and yellow. By the way, did you have an artifact spirit at that time?" Tang Zheng spoke frankly with assurance and gradually sorted out his thoughts. Of course there was an artifact spirit, but it was pitifully few. If a magic artifact had an artifact spirit, its power would definitely increase greatly. Tian Chanzi said with longing. He had once imagined that his magic artifact had an artifact spirit, but it was something that could only be encountered by chance. It had to be at the right time, place, and people to have an artifact spirit. Tang Zheng nodded and said, "But even if a magic artifact had an artifact spirit, it hadn't been promoted to a sacred artifact, right?" Tian Chanzi shook his head blankly. "Didn't I tell you before? I haven't even heard of the words sacred artifact." "That's right. Although there are occasionally artifacts in the world, there is no way for them to be promoted to sacred artifacts. Therefore, this is the key to why sacred artifacts are unknown. But I want to tell you now, sacred artifacts are more powerful than heaven, earth, black, and yellow level magic artifacts, and they must have an artifact spirit." Tian Chanzi was enlightened. His eyes stared straight at the war soul sword, licked his lips, and said with envy, "You brat, you're really lucky. You actually have a sacred sword. Do you know how many people don't even dare to dream about this?" Tang Zheng laughed, his finger gently brushed the war soul sword, and said, "This is called strength, understand?" Tian Chanzi rolled his eyes and joked, "Strength my ass, you've taken all the good things." Tang Zheng knew that this was probably closely related to the sword soul. Without a doubt, the sword soul was originally Kai Yu's item, so it was probably not as powerful as a sacred artifact. Although the sword soul's previous consciousness had been erased, its essence had not changed. Adding on the fact that it had absorbed so much baleful yin qi, it was able to undergo a qualitative change. It was also because the sword soul's previous consciousness had been erased that although it knew that its quality had increased, it still did not know that it had become a sacred artifact. "Tang Zheng, how do you know about the sacred artifact?" Empyrean fairy asked curiously. "Didn't I tell you that there are 2 more souls in my body?" "They told me." Empyrean fairy looked deeply at Tang Zheng and said, "Kai Yu and the inner demons are people from ancient times, even earlier than me. When I was young, I occasionally heard rumors about Kai Yu. They are not good people, so you have to be careful." Seeing that she was so concerned about him, Tang Zheng smiled and nodded to thank her. "Preposterous. Who is this little girl? How dare she talk about me like that?" Inner demons shouted unyieldingly. "You are not a good person, so why can't you say it?" Tang Zheng retorted, "If you are noisy again, I will directly silence you." Inner demons was angry, but there was nothing they could do. They coldly snorted a few times and did not dare to complain anymore. Empyrean fairy is the daughter of the Emperor of Heaven. This Emperor of Heaven is a person who came after us. It is said that he is also very powerful. Inner demons, of course you don't know about them. Caillou suddenly said. Tang Zheng's head thumped. Caillou must have secretly hidden in his body to know about these things. In the future, he must be wary of him. There were some things he could not let him know. Caillou, do you know anything about the Emperor of Heaven? Tang Zheng asked. Caillou smiled bitterly. He came after me, so how could I know? However, since Ji Wuxiang said that Fuxi is a descendant of Fuxi, then this Emperor of Heaven is naturally not an ordinary person. However, in ancient times, the Fuxi clan had already declined. I just didn't expect them to rise again and produce an Emperor of Heaven. Tang Zheng was deep in thought. Fuxi was a legendary figure, and was even more distant than Caillou and the Yellow Emperor. However, according to Caillou, Fuxi clan had already declined in ancient times, so Caillou knew very little about Fuxi clan. However, there was one thing that Tang Zheng was sure that Caillou definitely knew about, and that was the four symbols venerables and the witch clan. Back then, the witch clan was sealed by Caillou, so it was impossible for him not to know. Moreover, the four symbols venerables were damaged. If they were not repaired as soon as possible, it would always be a worry for Tang Zheng. When he asked this question, before Caillou could answer, the inner demons had already shouted, "What, you have already subdued the four symbols venerables? Hehe, Caillou, why have all your treasures been taken away by this young man? Hehe, young man, well done." Chapter 852. The information revealed by the inner demons shocked Tang Zheng greatly. He hurriedly said, "Caillou, now that the four symbols venerable is damaged, you must know how to repair it, right?" Caillou hesitated. In fact, he did have bad intentions. He had been waiting for an opportunity to seize Tang Zheng's body, but now that the inner demons had interfered, he had no choice but to appear. He was completely passive. Of course, he did not want Tang Zheng to recover the four symbols venerable, but now that he was asked this question, if he did not tell the truth, he would not be able to get away with it. "Yes, I know," Caillou said helplessly, "as long as you return to the witch tribe, there will naturally be a way to repair it. The four symbols venerable has always been nourished by the ley lines of the 100,000 mountains. As long as it is connected to the ley lines of the 100,000 mountains, everything will be done naturally. The square of the witch tribe is a huge formation. As long as the four symbols venerable returns, the formation will naturally be activated. The four symbols venerable can absorb the power of the ley lines and recover." Ley lines of the earth. Tang Zheng had a strange look on his face. Yes, ley lines of the earth are the power of the earth. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth is not only contained in the air, but also in everything. Even the soil on the ground contains spiritual qi. However, the power of ley lines of the earth cannot be absorbed by ordinary people. Only through a magical formation can it be drawn out and used for oneself. Hehe, you guys, the Jolie tribe has many strange spells. This is something I have never heard of. The inner demons clicked his tongue in wonder. Caillou snorted and said angrily, "How can you know all about the magic of the Jolie tribe? Is that so? Since it is so magical, then say it. Young man, I believe it will be very useful to you. Force him to say it." The inner demons gloated. "Inner demons, you." Caillou flew into a rage. Although Tang Zheng also wanted to know the magic of the Jolie tribe, he did not want to push Caillou too hard. That would be counterproductive. Stop arguing. Caillou, I won't force you to tell me the 9 Li tribe's magic. You just need to tell me why you imprisoned the witch tribe in the 100,000 mountains back then. This was a problem that had always troubled Tang Zheng and even the shaman tribe. Back then, the 100 Faces Star Lord had analyzed that only Caillou himself could imprison the witch tribe, and Tang Zheng had also seen Caillou lose in that illusion, and even had his heart dug out. However, for a powerhouse like Caillou, even if his heart was dug out, he might not necessarily die. For example, his heart of Caillou had been preserved, and there was even a strand of remnant soul left in it. Caillou hesitated, but seeing that Tang Zheng seemed to be impatient, he quickly said, "I'll tell you. The shaman tribe was indeed imprisoned by me in the 100,000 great mountains. Back in the Battle of Zhualu, after my defeat, my soul scattered, turning into strands of remnant souls to do what I have yet to do. One of them was to imprison the shaman tribe. The shaman tribe is a branch of the 9 Li tribe. Why did you only imprison the shaman tribe? Tang Zheng asked curiously. Because the origin of the 9 Li tribe is the shaman tribe. It's just that too many years have passed and many people no longer remember this matter. The shaman tribe is the core of the 9 Li tribe. As long as the shaman tribe is not destroyed, the 9 Li tribe will have the chance to create glory again. I know that after the Yellow Emperor won, there will no longer be a place for the shaman tribe in this world. I will imprison the shaman tribe in the 100,000 Great Mountains to recuperate and wait for the future to rise again. Caillou spoke frankly with assurance. This content made Tang Zheng's emotions surge. So the shaman tribe had such a great background. Back then, the core of the entire 9 Li tribe was the shaman tribe. Even the elders of the shaman tribe did not know about this. You're already dead. How can the shaman tribe make a comeback? Tang Zheng asked again. Caillou chuckled. Hehe, the reincarnation of the heavenly Tao. Back then, the Yellow Emperor won. In the future, there will be a day when I, Caillou, will win. Hasn't the shaman tribe already broken through the restriction and regained their freedom? If it wasn't for my coincidence, how could the shaman tribe regain their freedom? Haha, this is the reincarnation of the heavenly Tao. Everything is possible. How can you understand the mysteries within? Tang Zheng's heart trembled. In the unseen world, there were too many mysterious things that he was still unable to comprehend. However, since Caillou had made such arrangements, he was afraid that he truly had the confidence to do so. Although time had passed and the sea had turned into mulberry fields, and after tens of thousands of years, this day had finally arrived. But in Caillou's heart, this day had arrived, and that was his victory. The shaman tribe is not as powerful as before. How can you believe that they can recreate the glory of the past? Caillou laughed. In this world, there is nothing that the shaman tribe can't do. When the time is right, the shaman tribe will rise. The Zhuali tribe will reappear in the world and achieve hegemony. Listening to his crazy laughter, Tang Zheng's emotions surged. Talking to this kind of person was really a test of one's willpower. If he was not careful, he would be bewitched by him. Don't listen to his shameless boasting. If the shaman tribe was really so powerful, they wouldn't have been defeated by the Yellow Emperor. The inner demons suddenly jumped out and mocked. Inner demons, you and I are irreconcilable. Caillou roared. Come on, you couldn't do anything to me back then. Now, you can't do anything to me. The inner demons were ready to provoke him. Stop talking. Tang Zheng roared. As expected, the two of them quieted down. No matter how powerful they were in the past, at this moment, in Tang Zheng's body, they had no choice but to submit to Tang Zheng. I'll ask you one last question. Tang Zheng could see that the inner demons were getting impatient, so he said. Okay, I'll answer one more question. Don't ask me in the future. I won't answer even if you ask. Caillou was obviously in a bad mood. Tang Zheng did not care and asked directly. Xiaobai was hatched in the holy land of the shaman tribe. What is its origin? Ever since Xiaobai was hatched, the restriction that imprisoned the shaman tribe was automatically removed. Was this also set up by you in the past? Caillou was silent. The inner demon said first, the origin of this little guy of yours is not simple. Even I can't see through it. Caillou, don't be silent. Hurry up and tell me, what is its origin? Caillou's voice became very old. After a long time, he said, I can't answer this question. Ah, how can that be? Didn't you put it in the holy land of the shaman tribe? Tang Zheng was shocked and incredulous. It's true that I put it in the holy land, but what I put in back then was an egg, right? Caillou asked. Ah, yes. Back then, the first time Tang Zheng saw Xiaobai, it was an egg floating on the fiery red magma. Moreover, there were murals in the cave. The murals showed a person with 9 main meridians holding the egg with both hands. Then, the egg emitted a burst of white light and nothing else. He tried to imitate it, but to his surprise, the egg actually hatched after absorbing his true qi. After a dazzling white light, little white descended into the world. Now, Caillou said that even he did not know the origin of Xiao Bai, which seemed to be a little unreasonable. Caillou, since you said you would answer my question, what's the point of hiding it? Just answer it directly and I won't ask you any other questions. Tang Zheng thought that Caillou was lying perfunctorily. How am I hiding it? I really don't know the origin of Xiao Bai. Well, then I'll tell you everything. You can judge whether I'm lying to you or not. I'm all ears. I've never seen Xiao Bai before. I've only seen it in the shape of an egg. This egg has been passed down from the witch tribe. It's the sacred object of the witch tribe. No, it's the sacred object of the entire Nine Li tribe. However, only the patriarch of each generation knows about the existence of the sacred object. The origin of this sacred object can no longer be verified, but rumor has it that it was born when the world was created. There was once an almighty ancestor of the shaman tribe who successfully hatched this egg and became your little white. That is the sacred beast of the shaman tribe. But later on, the sacred beast was said to have died and left behind an egg, which has been secretly worshipped by the witch tribe. I've also thought of a way to hatch it, but I've never succeeded. However, I also engraved that possibility in the murals, because the ancestors of the witch tribe said that this way, it could be hatched. Sacred beast. Tang Zheng was shocked, and subconsciously stroked Xiao Bai who was on his shoulder. Did this little guy have such a great background? However, it was not the egg that was born when the world was created, but its descendant. Even so, it could be seen that its family background was actually related to the creation of the world. Tang Zheng was shocked and sighed, and a storm was set off in his heart. Because it's a sacred object, it has a mysterious power, so I used it as the core of the formation. Only by activating it and making it hatch can I unlock the formation and remove the restriction. I didn't expect you to succeed by accident. Even you were unable to hatch Xiao Bai back then. Why did you make it so difficult? Aren't you afraid that no one will be able to hatch it? Caillou said firmly, since the ancestor has hatched it before, it means that there is a chance, so I also believe that it will succeed. If it doesn't succeed, it means that the day of the witch tribe's revival has not arrived. As long as it succeeds, the witch tribe's sacred beast will descend into the world, which means that the witch tribe will rise again. Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he sneered, Xiao Bai was hatched by me, he won't help you for your so-called hegemony, because he only listens to me. Caillou was silent, and did not answer. The inner demons praised, amazing, amazing, Caillou, your scheme is so powerful, I really admire you. I'm afraid that even the Yellow Emperor back then did not expect you to have so many tricks up your sleeves, right? Caillou snorted, and did not comment. Young man, let me tell you why he has evil intentions towards you. He has been lurking in your body all this time, waiting for the day when he will occupy your body, then control Xiao Bai and complete his hegemony. Because if he changed to another body, he would not be able to control Xiao Bai at all. What a good scheme. The inner demons laughed. Tang Zheng felt a chill. Caillou, this time bomb, had calculated so well. This time, if the inner demons did not coincidentally enter his body, Caillou would be in great trouble one day, and he would not be able to resist. In the end, Caillou occupied his body, and Xiao Bai would definitely think that it was him, so he would obediently listen to Caillou. Chapter 853. Seeing Tang Zheng's ashen face, Tian Chanzi and the others hurriedly asked him what was going on. Tang Zheng shook his head. There was no need to spread this matter. Since he knew about this matter, he had to be extra vigilant against Caillou and not let him succeed. Let's leave this place. Since Caillou didn't want to talk, Tang Zheng could only give up and say this. What do we do with this bronze coffin? Tian Chanzi pointed at the huge object in front of them and asked. Tang Zheng's eyes turned and he curiously said, the inner demon's body is no different from a normal person's body. Why do they have to make such a big bronze coffin? Page. This is the masterpiece of Caillou and the Yellow Emperor. This bronze coffin can absorb all of the evil yin energy between heaven and earth. This canyon is the place where the evil yin energy is the densest. With such a large bronze coffin placed here, the coffin can absorb even more evil yin energy. It's as thick as water and wraps around me. Otherwise, How could it have trapped me for so many years? The inner demons hatefully said. Tang Jing suddenly realized that the reason the bronze coffin was so big was not to store the inner demons, but to store the evil yin energy. He was like a standard in a glass bottle, surrounded by the evil yin energy that was like water. Hearing Tang Zheng's explanation, the others also suddenly realized. Square root, destroy this damn bronze coffin for me. I get angry just looking at it. The inner demons urged. Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea. He chuckled and with a wave of his hand, he put it into Sumeru world, but he didn't destroy it. Why did you put it away? Why didn't you destroy it? Tang Zheng shrugged and said, this bronze coffin can absorb evil yin energy, so it can be considered a treasure. It would be a pity to destroy it. Even if it doesn't have any use, it's still an antique. There's probably only one such large bronze coffin in the world, so it's worth a lot. The inner demons were speechless. The few of them went up the canyon and looked down. The canyon was still gloomy and filled with corpses of demonic beasts. This time, more than half of the demonic beasts in the 100,000 mountains had died, and the 100 transformation star sovereign had suffered heavy losses. Where are we going now? Tian Chanzi asked. Tang Jing already had a plan. He said, let's return to the shaman tribe first. The 4 symbols venerable is damaged. I need to repair it first. The group naturally did not object. They returned along the way, and when they saw the broken tombs, their expressions did not look good. These ancient experts, even in death, could not rest in peace. They were awakened by the 100 transformation Star-Lord using a secret technique. They charged and broke through the enemy lines, and in the end, not even their corpses remained. After leaving the prehistoric heavenly tomb, the air was clear. However, it was already late. The few of them rested not far away for the night. In the darkness of the night, there seemed to be countless pairs of eyes staring at them, but they acted as if they did not see them. Tang Zheng knew that the 100 transformation star sovereign must have sent demonic beasts to secretly monitor them. This was unavoidable, so why not let him see it openly? In any case, it wouldn't be long before he guessed that he had been tricked by Tang Zheng. The next day, at dawn, the few of them made a long journey to the shaman tribe. The shaman tribe seemed to be in ruins. Back then, in order to take out the heaven and earth profound stone under the plaza, Tang Zheng had dug up the entire plaza. Therefore, it was a complete mess. Seeing that, Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. The plaza was destroyed. Was the array still there? In the end, it proved that his worries were unnecessary. The array formation that Caillou had set up was obviously not just on the surface. Even if the stone slabs on the surface of the plaza were all destroyed, the array formation was still intact. Tang Zheng summoned the 4 symbols venerable. When the gigantic body appeared, it immediately split into 2, then into 4, and then into 4. They automatically walked to the corresponding place and stopped moving. It was as if they had returned to their original appearance when they were protecting the shaman clan. Looking at this familiar scene, Tang Zheng could not help but feel a little absent-minded. He still remembered the shocking scene when he walked out of the house and saw the 4 symbols venerable for the first time. It will take at least a day for the 4 symbols venerable to fully recover, Caillou said. Then we'll stay here for a day, Tang Zheng said without hesitation. The others agreed. Fortunately, these houses were built very firmly. Although they had been gone for a long time, they were not in a dilapidated state. After tidying them up, they could still be lived in. The Empyrean fairy seemed to like the environment here. She took a deep breath and said, "This place is much better than the big cities outside." Tang Zheng could not help but laugh. She was an ancient person and had long been used to the ancient environment. Of course, she would have such feelings. However, speaking of which, if the 100,000 mountains were developed, it would definitely be more beautiful than any scenic spot in the world. Of course, this was just his imagination. It was impossible to realize. There were still many monsters lurking in the 100,000 mountains. How could ordinary people get close? The Empyrean fairy leaped up like a dancing fairy. She flew up to the top of a branch and looked into the distance. Ling did not know why, but she pursed her lips and actually looked a little sad. Her eyes were red. Ling what's wrong? Master, this place is very similar to my home. A long time ago, I lived in the mountains with my grandfather. The scenery there was also very beautiful. If my grandfather was still here, he would definitely like this place. Tang Jing held Ling hand and encouraged her. Ling, be good. Grandfather's spirit in heaven also wants to see you happy. Don't be sad. Ling nodded. Ling is not sad. Ling has a master. Ling is very happy. Master, you said that if I lived here, it would definitely be very interesting, just like when I was young. Ling spun around on the spot and smiled brightly. This is the old land of the witch clan. They have lived here for countless years, so they must have feelings for it. Although they are forced to leave their homes, this place must be a concern for them. If there is a chance in the future, we will return here and build this place up. Tang Zheng's heart moved, and this thought popped up in his mind. Tang Zheng stroked Ling hair and laughed. That day will come. Really? Ling was overjoyed. Seeing Tang Zheng nod, her excited face flushed red. She hugged Tang Zheng's neck and kissed him on the face. Ooh! Tang Zheng froze on the spot as if he had been immobilized. Ling was like a child who had done something wrong. She pursed her lips and said, Master, don't be angry with Ling. Ling couldn't help it, so she didn't notice. Looking at her aggrieved look, Tang Zheng sighed. She was an innocent little girl. This was just an expression of her emotions, and there was no deeper meaning. He let out a long sigh and nodded. Ling, don't cry. I don't blame you. Just remember not to kiss others in the future. It's not good. Ling nodded like she was pounding garlic. Ling will remember. Ling will never kiss others. She meant that she would only kiss Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't say anything, but from the corner of his eye, he noticed that the Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi were looking at him from afar. Tian Chanzi even had a meaningful smile on his face, which made Tang Zheng roll his eyes helplessly. Who knew what this old guy was thinking about? Master, look at the 4 symbols venerable. Ling called out suddenly. Tang Zheng quickly looked over and saw the 4 symbols venerable's body emitting a faint glow. He was overjoyed. It really worked. This time, Caillou didn't lie to him. Since the inner demons said that the 4 symbols venerable was so powerful, then he probably hadn't used its full power yet. He would have to slowly discover its power in the future. Master, look at your feet. Ling called out again. Tang Zheng looked down and found that there were still no changes on the ground. He hurriedly circulated his energy and found that a surge of energy was flowing toward the 4 symbols venerable. The energy of the ley lines. Tang Zheng immediately remembered what Caillou said. This was the formation gathering the energy of the ley lines, which was the spiritual energy in the soil. Aya, Master, look at Ling. Wow, good job. Something is drilling into the soles of Ling's feet. Suddenly, Ling made a big fuss and giggled incessantly. Hee, so comfortable. It also feels like I'm scratching an itch. Wow, Master, my true energy is increasing. Really? Tang Zheng was shocked. Although he felt the surge of energy flowing through his feet, he didn't have the slightest reaction. Ling actually had a reaction. It was really strange. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. That's right, since this energy could be injected into the 4 symbols venerable, then it could also be used by Ling. Because Ling was transformed from a ginseng, absorbing the spiritual energy in the soil was a natural thing. Ling, focus and absorb as much of this energy as possible, Tang Zheng instructed. Yes, Ling will listen to Master. Ling nodded and circulated her energy. In an instant, Ling's body was suffused with a sparkling and translucent light. Roots actually grew from her feet and pierced into the ground. The energy entered her body through the roots. Upon seeing this, the Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi also gathered around and watched this scene curiously. Tian Chanzi clicked his tongue in wonder, and said, "This girl is really lucky. Just now, I took a look at this large formation. It's really amazing. The spiritual energy in the entire 100,000 mountains is converging here. Caillou set up this formation in the past is really too amazing. When this converging energy enters the body, It will quickly transform into vital qi and increase the cultivation level. It's much faster than this girl's cultivation speed. The Empyrean fairy also nodded. This is her opportunity. It's harder for plants to cultivate into spirits than animals, because animals have their own consciousness. With consciousness, cultivation will be much easier. It's very difficult for plants to cultivate their own consciousness, so the demonic beasts you see are almost all animals. Tang Jing suddenly understood. He hadn't thought about this problem before. It turned out that Ling Er's current situation was really a huge opportunity. She's simple and honest, so it's a blessing for her to be taken in by you. You can protect her. Otherwise, if she falls into the hands of other people or demonic beasts, she'll be a great tonic. Eating her will not only increase one's lifespan, but also increase one's power. Tang Zheng's head trembled, and he said, "Stop, don't say any more. I'll protect Ling Er and not let her come to any harm." Chapter 854. As time passed, Linger's entire body was bathed in a burst of light. When the sky gradually darkened and the light dissipated, her eyes flashed with a bright light. Her face immediately blossomed into a smile as she cheered, "Master, Linger has become powerful." Saying this, she stretched out her arm and a vine shot out from her palm. With a bang, it struck a distant rock and the rock immediately shattered. This move was as fast as lightning and as powerful as thunder. It was definitely a realm only an expert could reach. Tang Zheng stared at her without blinking and cried out in surprise, "Linger, your cultivation has actually reached the 9th grade of Inedia." Linger's original cultivation was only at the early stage of Inedia. Now, she had actually jumped to the 9th grade of Inedia. It was truly a rocket speed. "You're much more powerful than me," Tang Zheng sincerely praised. Linger's face was like a peach blossom as she happily said, "Linger is not as powerful as Master. Master is the most powerful. The two of you should stop flattering each other. Ling Er is in a special situation. The array formation in this square is indeed extraordinary. The power it gathers is no small matter. In addition, Linger's body is a condensation of heaven and earth's spiritual energy. Naturally, her ability to absorb and store energy is much stronger than normal people. Otherwise, if a normal person absorbed so much energy, they would probably have exploded long ago." Empyrean Fairy explained. Tang Jing suddenly understood, so that's how it is. No matter what, Linger's cultivation has greatly increased. This is something worth celebrating. In the future, she will at least have the ability to protect herself. Linger was like Tang Seng's meat. If she did not have the ability to protect herself, anyone could take a bite out of her. That would be truly dangerous. The night was like water. Everyone went to bed early. Tomorrow morning, the 4 symbols venerables would finish repairing. In the night, rustling sounds could be heard in the forest. Little White, who was lying on Tang Jing's bed, twitched its ears and immediately stood up. It stared out of the window and squeaked. Tang Jing got up and touched Xiao Bai, saying, "There's movement." Xiao Bai nodded seriously. "Looks like the 100 Faces Star Sovereign realized that he was tricked by me, so he chased after me," Tang Jing said thoughtfully. He got off the bed and walked out, only to find that the other 3 had also come out. They looked at each other, and Tang Jing said, "The 100 Faces Star Sovereign is here. Temph, let's make sure he doesn't return this time." The Empyrean Fairy said. She knew how powerful the 100 Change Starlord was, so she did not swear that she would definitely get rid of him. For experts of their level, it was easier said than done to get rid of him. The noise in the forest grew louder and louder, rumbling as if there was a magnificent army. Bang bang bang. Rows of tall trees were snapped in half. Pairs of cold eyes sparkled in the night like burning will-o-wisps. "Tang Jing, get the hell out here." The 100 Faces Star Sovereign's roar came from afar, and the sound waves rushed over. The high walls of the witch tribe were actually shaken by the sound waves, making creaking sounds. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign slowly rose into the air, looking down at everything in the tribe from above. He happened to see Tang Zheng and the others. When enemies met, their eyes were exceptionally red. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign's eyes were filled with killing intent as he said, "Tang Zheng, how dare you lie to me? You even dare to lie and say that you are the inner demons. Although I don't know what method you used, the inner demons are already dead. Nonsense, you're the one who's dead. The inner demons were indignant, but they could only complain to Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng took a few steps forward, looked at the 100 Faces Star Sovereign in the air, and said with a smile that was not a smile, "Are you really so sure that the inner demons are dead? If you guessed wrong, then your life will be in danger. H. Now that things have come to this, do you still want to lie to me? Everything you say and do along the way cannot escape my eyes and ears. Do you think I don't know? If you were the inner demons, H, then the people around you would have died long ago, or become your slaves." Tang Zheng nodded, and laughed in ridicule. "Hehe, you've actually become smarter. You finally admit it. You're so daring to play with me. Today, I'll let you die in this 10,000 mountains." The 100 Faces Star Sovereign said resolutely. Tang Zheng asked with a smile, "Do you think you can kill us all?" The 100 Faces Star Sovereign's eyes flickered as he said, "My demonic beast's army will definitely crush all of you." With that, he waved his hand and immediately gave the signal to attack. With a rumble, groups of demonic beasts tried to attack the tribe's walls. "Everyone, be careful," Tang Zheng reminded. Just as he was about to rush up, he realized that someone had beaten him to it. The Empyrean fairy's figure flashed, and like an arrow leaving the bow, she shot towards the 100 Faces Star Sovereign, and shouted, "He's mine, no one can snatch him from me." The 100 Faces Star Sovereign also faced the Empyrean fairy, and shouted, "Since you dare to challenge me, I'll let you know how powerful I am." With a wave of his hand, the aura of heaven and earth changed in an instant. A cloud of water vapor condensed, and directly turned into a ferocious beast, and bit towards the Empyrean fairy's face. The Empyrean fairy's hand flashed, and the mountain river map appeared in her hand. She threw it into the sky, and with a flash of light, the beast disappeared without a trace, sucked into the mountain river map. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign's eyes flickered, and he said in surprise, What a powerful magic treasure, it's actually a sacred weapon. Do you think you're the only one with a sacred weapon?" As soon as he finished speaking, the air in front of the 100 Faces Star Sovereign shook, and a black light flashed, and a black banner appeared. There were complicated patterns on the banner, and it gave off a mysterious feeling. "I'll let you have a taste of the power of my sky water banner." The 100 Faces Star Sovereign shouted, and with a wave of his arm, the banner flickered, and in the originally clear night sky, there was a bright moon, and the moonlight was like silver. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and heavy rain poured down. The strangest thing was that there were no clouds in the sky. The pattering raindrops seemed to contain a mysterious power, falling from the sky, and all of them were directed at the fairy of the 9 heavens. The Empyrean fairy became the target of public criticism, but her expression did not change, and she shouted, "Mountain river map, absorb." The mountain river map produced a terrifying suction force, and the overwhelming raindrops were all sucked into it, but the Empyrean fairy was unharmed. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign did not care and shouted angrily, "This mountain river map is really not simple, but I haven't used the power of my sky water banner yet. Continue to take the attack." The sky water banner shook, and for no reason, a flood fell from the sky, as if it had the power to destroy everything. Like a raging dragon, it rushed toward the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy's expression turned cold, knowing that the power of this attack was far stronger than before. She did not dare to be careless, and shouted, "Do you think you're the only one who can summon water? My mountain river map contains everything in the world, how can it not have water?" She pointed her finger at the stately painting, and a torrential flood rushed out from the painting to meet the water column that was like a raging dragon. Boom! The two water columns collided in midair, and it was difficult to tell who would win, and they were in a stalemate. Both sides gritted their teeth and kept urging their power, trying to defeat each other in one go. However, this was obviously an extravagant hope. The two were evenly matched, and this kind of battle was a battle of attrition. As for the others, they had already chosen their opponents. Tian Chanzi originally wanted to deal with the giant, but Tang Zheng beat him to it and had already fought with the giant. Tian Chanzi had to fight with the other monstrous beasts. His power had increased greatly, and he was now a 9th grade Yuaniing, which was far stronger than these monstrous beasts. Therefore, he was no match for them at all. One by one, the monstrous beasts fell at his feet, and blood flowed like a river. Ling Er did not stay out of it. She had never fought before, but now that her power had increased greatly, she could not help but join in the battle. There were also some monstrous beasts whose cultivation was lower than hers, so she had already defeated a few of them. However, there were many monstrous beasts, and it was her first battle, so she could not help but be flustered. In a moment of carelessness, a monstrous beast sneaked up on her from behind and slapped her with its claw, as if it wanted to smash her into a pile of minced meat. Squeak, squeak. Little White's voice suddenly rang out. A beam of fire shot up into the sky, and the raging flames wrapped around the demonic beast. It let out a miserable cry and hurriedly retreated. How could it have the chance to attack Ling Er? Tang Zheng had specially instructed Xiao Bai to protect Ling Er. Xiao Bai was dutiful. How could he let these monstrous beasts succeed? Tang Zheng's battle was also very intense. The giant relied on its huge body to suppress him everywhere, causing Tang Zheng to not dare to let his guard down. However, his War Soul Sword had already become a sacred artifact. Even if it was the same heaven-flying immortal sword technique, its power would multiply in his hands. Swish, swish, swish. The War Soul Sword had already opened a few huge wounds on the giant's body, causing blood to flow out. The giant roared a few times, but it did not fall down. Instead, its ferocious nature was aroused, and the more it fought, the braver it became. The giant did not have any magic treasures, and completely relied on its own body. Moreover, its body was as tough as steel, and if not for the War Soul Sword being incomparably sharp, it would not have been able to harm it. The giant's lantern-like eyes stared fixedly at Tang Zheng, and its fists and feet immediately followed the direction of its eyes and attacked Tang Zheng. Bang! The attack missed, and a deep pit appeared on the ground. His arm directly swept across the city wall, and with a boom, a large hole appeared on the city wall. Tang Zheng was shocked. This big guy's attack power was not inferior to the Four Symbols Venerable One, and it had its own consciousness. If it was a one-on-one fight, it would be even stronger than the Four Symbols Venerable One. The Four Symbols Venerable One still needed his control in order to have such a powerful fighting strength. In ancient times, when the giant clan still existed, there were still quite a few of these giants. It could be seen how tragic the battle was. At the very least, the scene he saw from Kai Yu's illusion was deeply engraved in his memory, something he would never forget for the rest of his life. When the giant saw that he was unable to attack Tang Zheng from beginning to end, and that his body had been cut by the War Soul Sword instead, he was both angry and anxious. His attacks became even more ferocious, as if he had gone mad. In an instant, the city wall was almost completely destroyed by him, and deep pits of varying sizes appeared on the ground, as if it had been struck by a meteorite. Although Tang Zheng was unable to kill his opponent immediately, fighting with an expert of this level was quite helpful in increasing his fighting strength. The more he fought, the braver he became, and the more proficient he became in the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique. The horizon gradually lit up, and when the first ray of sunlight shone on the ground, all that could be seen was a scene of devastation and corpses everywhere. Boom! Chapter 855. The Four Symbols Venerable opened his eyes. His eyes flickered with light as if they were alive. This was something that had never happened before. Boom! The Four Symbols Venerables moved at the same time. They leaped over the crumbling walls and arrived in front of the giant. The giant was even taller than the four divine beasts. However, the four divine beasts exerted their strength together and coordinated their steps as if they were one. Boom! Boom! Four hammer-like fists hit the giant's waist. Roar! The Four Symbols Venerable let out a heart-wrenching scream as he staggered backwards. However, the Four Symbols Reverend did not give the giant a chance to catch his breath. With a flash of his body, he immediately grabbed the giant's four limbs. Thump! The giant fell to the ground, causing the ground to tremble incessantly. It even crushed the few demonic beasts below into meat patties. Tang Zheng watched this scene in astonishment. In the past, the Four Symbols Venerables required him to personally control them in order to unleash their enormous power. However, At this very moment, without his control, the might of the four symbols' supreme beasts was even greater than before. Moreover, he saw a trace of spiritual aura in the four symbols' venerables' eyes. It was as if the four symbols' venerable truly possessed life. This was something that had never happened before. The eyes of the four symbols' venerables had always been filled with chaos. They did not have eyes at all. However, at this moment, they seemed to be human. Not only has the four symbols' venerable recovered, his strength has also increased by a level. In fact, he has even gained consciousness. Tang Zheng's heart thumped violently. When the inner demons had told him about the four divine beasts, he had thought that the four divine beasts must have had consciousness. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, the four symbols' venerables actually recovered their consciousness. This was truly too amazing. With self-awareness, the four symbols' strength was clearly a level higher than Tang Zheng's control. His eyes were burning. He wanted to go up and help, but he found that there was no need for him. The giant's four limbs were grabbed by the four symbols' venerable. It struggled incessantly, trying to break free and regain its freedom. However, the four symbols' venerables held him firmly, so he couldn't break free at all. Moreover, the four symbols' venerables all ran in different directions. Boom! Boom! The ground trembled. The four symbols' venerables were like wild horses that had broken free of their reins. Not only were they powerful, but they were also very fast. Tang Zheng had a flash of inspiration in his mind, and a word popped up in his mind: dismemberment by 5 horses. This scene was the best example. The four supremes each charged toward the other, and in an instant, the giant's body was straightened. His struggle instantly became more and more intense. Clearly, he understood that he was at a critical juncture of life and death. However, the four symbols' venerables continued to flee silently, leaving behind deep tracks on the ground. They did not give the giant any chance to retaliate at all. Roar! The giant let out a heart-wrenching scream as streaks of blood appeared on its body. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as the giant exploded from within. Blood filled the air as it was split into 4 large pieces. It couldn't be any more dead. Tang Zheng swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He was deeply shocked by this scene. The ferocity of the four symbols' venerable far exceeded his imagination. Moreover, the violent and vicious aura they emitted caused him to be shocked. This murderous aura was condensed from countless battles. It was definitely not something that could be cultivated overnight. The four symbols' venerable threw away the severed limbs in disgust and suddenly turned their heads. 4 pairs of eyes looked at Tang Zheng in unison. Tang Zheng's heartstrings trembled. Those eyes contained a soul-stirring demonic power. Even with his firm will, his heart could not help but sway. Bang, bang, bang. The four symbols' venerable walked toward Tang Zheng in unison, emitting a biting cold murderous aura and vicious aura. Tang Zheng's brows furrowed. He had a bad premonition. The four symbols' venerable seemed to have broken free from his control. Tang Zheng, the four symbols' venerable has already regained consciousness. It's my demonic pet. I'll lend it to you for the time being. Caillou's voice rang out. There was a hint of pride in it. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He said, "You're saying that the four symbols' venerable only listens to your orders?" Hee, of course. It's my demonic pet, so of course it only listens to my orders. However, I'm temporarily residing in your body right now, so I'll lend it to you. Caillou said. Tang Zheng did not comment. He hurriedly circulated his inner energy. With a thought, he attempted to communicate with the four symbols' venerable and control it. However, his eyes immediately dimmed. There was actually no reaction at all. The mysterious connection from before had completely vanished. He felt dejected. He did not think that restoring the four symbols' venerable this time would cause such an unforeseen event. He did not know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. The good thing was that he would have such a powerful helper in the future. The bad thing was that the four symbols' venerable no longer listened to his orders. Caillou, so you already had this in mind when you told the young man how to restore the four symbols' venerable. Hehe, you're really cunning. The inner demons jumped out and said jokingly, "Inner demons, don't talk nonsense. In the past, The four symbols venerable did not truly awaken. This time, with the help of the formation, it absorbed enough energy and awakened its consciousness. This is also a coincidence. Caillou immediately retorted. Tang Zheng remained silent. He could not guess whether this was Caillou's doing on purpose for the time being. In any case, he would always be on guard against the two of them. The four symbols venerable looked down at Tang Zheng from above. Tang Zheng raised his head and looked at it. When their gazes met, Tang Zheng dismissed all distracting thoughts and ordered, "Deal with those monsters." The four symbols venerable did not say anything. It turned around and attacked the monster horde. Tang Zheng could not figure it out anyway, so he might as well make the most of it. As for what would happen in the future, who could say for sure? With the addition of the four symbols venerables, the exhausted cultivators who had been besieged by the demonic beasts relaxed. They watched as the four symbols venerables slaughtered the demonic beasts in every direction. Their four gigantic bodies were like killing machines, extremely efficient. The corpses of the monsters were scattered all over the forest. Some were hanging from the treetops, some were in large pits, and some were lying in the ruins of the city walls. Tang Zheng turned his gaze and stared at the Empyrean Fairy and the Hundred Faces Starlord who were fighting fiercely in the air. The two of them had already exchanged countless blows. All sorts of abilities were thrown back and forth. It was extremely intense. Tang Zheng could not help but sigh in amazement. A battle of this level was truly fascinating. He could not help but look forward to when he could become so powerful. The Empyrean Fairy and the Hundred Faces Starlord had profound cultivation. After fighting for half the night, they were not tired at all. They were still surrounded by danger. The four symbols venerable's sky water banner summoned a torrential flood. After the Empyrean Fairy summoned the flood, she also summoned a huge mountain. It fell from the sky and smashed directly at the Hundred Faces Starlord. The Hundred Faces Starlord continuously channeled his power. The sky water banner flickered and the torrential flood blocked the huge mountain. However, the huge mountain was too heavy. It fell bit by bit, and the water spread in all directions. Boom! The water exploded and the huge mountain fell heavily. The Hundred Faces Starlord was directly crushed under the mountain. The ground shook violently as if there was an earthquake. The four symbols venerable was crushed under the mountain. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Tang Zheng was extremely shocked. He glanced at Tian Chanzi and Linga from the corner of his eyes. Linga was already dumbfounded. Her cherry mouth was wide open and her little tongue was sticking out. The mountain river map is actually so powerful. It can even summon a huge mountain. What else is in the map? The mountain river map was different from ordinary magic treasures. It had its own universe. It was like another world. It had mountains, rivers, plants, and trees, and could be summoned for one's own use. Tang Zheng had also obtained the mountain river map before, but he could not use these magical powers. The Empyrean Fairy's expression didn't relax. She was still serious as she stared at the mountain without blinking. Suddenly, the huge mountain shook. Even the ground shook as if there was an earthquake. Tang Zheng was shocked. He knew that the Hundred Faces Starlord was not dead even after being crushed by the huge mountain. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion rang out as the mountain exploded. Rubble flew everywhere like meteors, shooting in all directions. Dodge! Tang Zheng stomped out and hurriedly stood in front of Linga to protect her. With the holy armor shield in front of him, a series of peng, peng, peng sounds rang out as wave after wave of powerful energy surged out from the holy armor shield. The sorcerer tribe was in ruins. It was as if they had been hit and collapsed. There were deep pits on the ground, like the surface of the moon. The sorcerer tribe was the root of the sorcerer tribe. Now that it was destroyed, Tang Zheng was heartbroken. If the sorcerer tribe saw this, they would be heartbroken. The rain of rocks stopped. Tang Zheng removed the holy armor shield. The ground in front of him had completely caved in. It was a huge pit. The celestial master of 100 Faces stood in the pit in a sorry state. His clothes were in a mess, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His originally delicate face had turned blue, and his eyes seemed to spit fire as he stared at the Empyrean maiden. "Where did your mountain river map come from? Why is it so powerful?" The 100 Faces Star-Lord roared angrily. The Empyrean fairy snorted and did not answer. Seeing this, the 100 Faces Star-Lord was angry and anxious. Obviously, the mountain river map was more powerful than his celestial water banner. Their cultivation levels were almost the same, but due to the difference in their treasures, he was no match for the Empyrean fairy. He was not reconciled. Previously, he was infatuated with the inner demons and was scared. Then, he was played by Tang Zheng. Now, he was defeated by the Empyrean fairy who came out of nowhere. He was in a sorry state. This was simply a great humiliation. One had to know that even in ancient times, Multiform Star-Lord was a ruthless character. He had always been the one to bully others, and no one had ever bullied him. Therefore, he treated those weaker than him as toys. Back in Mount Buzhou, he wanted to keep Tang Zheng and the others as his toys. But now, he realized that the power of the toys was too strong. It was beyond his imagination and his life was in danger. Run. Although he was burning with anger, he did not completely lose his mind. He knew that staying here would not do him any good. Moreover, Tang Zheng and the others were watching from the side. He was especially wary of the Four Symbols Reverend. Just now, the Four Symbols Reverend had cleanly dismembered the giant he had painstakingly resurrected. This scene immediately reminded him of the stories he had heard about the Four Symbols Reverend before he was imprisoned in Mount Buzhou. The Four Symbols Reverend was not a kind person. He was ferocious and cruel. Moreover, the Four Symbols Reverend who now had his own consciousness was not the same as before. He was definitely a big threat to him. Chapter 856. 100 Change Star Sovereign's expression changed when his thoughts were seen through. However, he pretended to be calm and said, "I think you're the one who wants to escape." Empyrean Fairy laughed mockingly and said, "Is that so? Then let's see who will escape." With a point of her finger, the mountain and river map flew toward 100 Change Star Sovereign. The light of 100 Change Star Sovereign's sky water banner was very dim and was far inferior to the mountain and river map. Seeing the mountain and river map flying over, 100 Change Star Sovereign did not dare to argue anymore. He jumped out of the deep pit and fled into the forest. Tang Zheng and the others were dumbfounded. This 100 Change Star Sovereign was really a genius. He was still vowing to kill the Empyrean Fairy a second ago, and the next second, he was running away like a rabbit. He really escaped. "Do you think I'll let you have your way?" Empyrean Fairy said coldly. Just as she was about to chase after him, she heard a buzzing sound coming from the forest. The demonic beasts that had escaped were actually running back. Even 100 Change Star Sovereign retreated in a sorry state with an ugly look on his face. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A few huge demonic beasts' heads flew out from the forest and landed heavily on the ground, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Empyrean Fairy stopped abruptly and looked suspiciously at the dense forest. Even Tang Zheng and the others quieted down and stared intently at the front. The buzzing sound became louder and louder. A few trees fell to the ground and a few spinning things appeared in the sky. The buzzing sound came from these things. These things looked like bamboo hats but were much bigger than bamboo hats. It was unknown how they could fly in the sky. "What are these?" The few of them muttered in their hearts. They could actually force the demonic beasts to retreat. Even 100 Change Star Sovereign had retreated. Tang Zheng and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. Obviously, they did not know what these things were. 100 Change Star Sovereign's shoulder was dyed red. This was the blood that was not there earlier. Could it be that he was injured by these bamboo hat-like things? What was it that could injure 100 Change Star Sovereign? The few of them became nervous. Rustle. With a slight noise, a few silhouettes came out of the forest and stood at a distance. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank because he saw a familiar face, Fair-Faced Flying Dragon. Fair-Faced Flying Dragon had disappeared without a trace after they parted ways in the mausoleum of the first Qin Emperor. As for his origin, Tang Zheng had no idea. Seeing him again today, Tang Zheng couldn't help but be surprised. Fair-faced flying dragon had nearly died at the hands of Qin Shi Huang previously. Who knew what he was up to this time? Tang Zheng's gaze swept past him, then he looked at the others. They were all unfamiliar faces, and the person standing at the very front was wearing a mask. A mask. Tang Zheng's heart stirred as he faintly remembered the information he had searched for in Jian Shisan's mind using the soul-searching technique. Azure Dragon Hall's High Lord. Wasn't he just wearing a mask all the time? Could it be that fair-faced flying dragon was from the Azure Dragon Hall? Actually, fair-faced flying dragon was so powerful. In this world, other than the Azure Dragon Hall, there was no other place that had such a powerful martial artist. As for the other unfamiliar faces, as well as the bamboo hat that was spinning in the air, it made Tang Zheng think of another thing. Flying guillotine. Legend had it that the Flying Guillotine was the most mysterious assassin team in the Azure Dragon Hall. Every one of them was at least a master-level martial artist, but no one had seen them in these past few years. This was probably the Flying Guillotine of the Azure Dragon Hall. 100 Change Star Sovereign stopped and asked in a flustered and exasperated manner, "Who are you people?" The High Lord took a step forward and said indifferently, "Azure Dragon Hall." His voice was neither fast nor slow, but it was full of pressure. It was as if he was speaking beside everyone's ears, causing their eardrums to hurt. "So you are from the Azure Dragon Hall." Although 100 Change Star Sovereign lived in seclusion, he had already heard the name of this organization. What martial artists? In ancient times, martial artists and cultivators were of the same origin, but now they are killing each other. 100 Change Star Sovereign said. The High Lord said meaningfully, "With the times, this society is progressing. The situation in ancient times does not represent the current situation. Moreover, you cultivators have to fight to the death, so why can't we, martial artists, fight to the death with you cultivators? That depends on whether or not you have the ability." 100 Change Star Sovereign said hatefully. The High Lord laughed strangely and pointed at the bloodstain on 100 Change Star Sovereign's shoulder. "Haven't you already seen it? That was because you ambushed me. I was careless and fell into your trap." 100 Change Star Sovereign angrily roared. Just now, he was only concerned with escaping from the Empyrean Maiden, but he did not expect to be surrounded by the flying guillotine that fell from the sky as soon as he entered the forest. The flying guillotine almost wrapped around his head. If it had really wrapped around his head, he was afraid that his head would have been separated from his body. Fortunately, he had discovered it in time and quickly dodged. Otherwise, his shoulder would have been injured more than this. This group of people had a strong background. If it was one-on-one, 100 Change Star Sovereign was confident that he could deal with them all. However, when they were together, their strength was multiplied. Moreover, he had gone through an entire night of fighting and killing, so he had consumed a lot of energy. Moreover, he was already injured under that huge mountain, which was why he was in such a difficult situation. The High Lord laughed in a low voice, 100 Change Star Sovereign, "If you are injured, then so be it. You still have so many excuses. This is not the style of an ancient expert." 100 Change Star Sovereign's eyes trembled. "You seem to know me quite well." "Of course. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. I know a little bit about everyone's background. Otherwise, how would I dare to come here?" The High Lord was full of confidence. "Is that so? You really think that these people can deal with me?" The High Lord said, "Not only to deal with you, but also those people." He pointed at Tang Zheng and the others. Tang Zheng and the others' pupils shrank as they stared at the High Lord. This stance was really big. The Azure Dragon Hall had always been mysterious. It was fine if they did not appear, but when they did, they actually planned such a big scheme. It was shocking and also amazing the other party's ambition. The Empyrean Fairy stared at the other party. "You boast that you know all of us. Could it be that you know me as well?" The Great Lord pointed at the fair-faced flying dragon beside him and said, "My Azure Dragon Hall's fair-faced flying dragon has met the mysterious maiden of the 9 heavens once. Of course, I can trace your origin and know your origin." The Empyrean Fairy's eyes flashed as she stared at fair-faced flying dragon without blinking, saying, "I never thought that you would actually be able to escape from Qin Shi Huang's Tai'er sword." Fair-faced flying dragon chuckled. With a flick of his wrist, sword light flashed and a long sword filled with killing intent was placed horizontally in front of his chest. Tayar sword. Tang Zheng and the Empyrean fairy cried out in alarm at the same time. Back then, Qin Shi Huang had used the Tayar sword to kill fair-faced flying dragon. Later on, the connection between the sword and the Qin Shi Huang was severed and its whereabouts were unknown. It turned out that fair-faced flying dragon had used some unknown method to steal the Tayar sword. Tang Zheng was incomparably shocked. He had seen the Tayar sword's might before. Moreover, ever since he knew about saint weapons, he was certain that the Tayar sword was a saint weapon. Such a peerless saint weapon had actually fallen into fair-faced flying dragon's hands. Didn't this mean that his strength had increased greatly? In truth, fair-faced flying dragon had taken the risk to enter Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum in order to seize the Tayar sword. In the end, Qin Shi Huang had used the sword to kill him, which was exactly what he wanted. He had already thought of a foolproof plan to seize the Tayar sword. How could he fail? Thus, he secretly stole the Tayar sword. By the time Qin Shi Huang discovered it, it was already too late. At that time, fair-faced flying dragon had already escaped. Fair-faced flying dragon would naturally inform the High Lord of what had happened in Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. With the Azure Dragon Hall's power, it would not be difficult for them to find out the origins of the Empyrean fairy. Fair-faced flying dragon proudly laughed. The two of you even recognize this sword. Back then, it was all thanks to you two holding back Qin Shi Huang that I had the chance to seize this sword. In truth, I never thought that Qin Shi Huang would be able to come back from the dead. If it wasn't for you two, I would have been killed by him. Speaking of which, I really have to thank the two of you. Tang Zheng angrily said, Fair-faced flying dragon, don't be so smug. Back then, you escaped so quickly, and now you're jumping out with such pride. In my opinion, the Azure Dragon Hall is only SOSO. The High Lord's gaze was cold as he stared at Tang Zheng, saying, the Azure Dragon Hall is not something you can judge. Tang Zheng, in fact, I have already met you for a long time. Met for a long time? Where? Tang Zheng curiously asked. However, at that time, you were only a baby in swaddling clothes. You were born with the 9-yang saint body. This kind of person is a genius rarely seen in 10,000 years. How could I let you live? Thus, I ordered the martial sect's previous sect leader to kill you. Tang Zheng's heart beat wildly as killing intent leaked out from his eyes. He clenched his fists until they made popping sounds. The two of them already had a feud. Back then, he was almost killed because of him. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth and said, you must be very regretful that you couldn't kill me. There is a bit of regret. I never thought that Wu Junshan would be so powerful as to deceive everyone and allow you to escape. The High Lord sighed. Tang Zheng thought about the torture he suffered when he was young and how he was lucky enough to almost lose his life. He was so angry that his eyes were about to spit fire. You hate me, don't you? No, you should be thanking me. If I didn't want to kill you, how could you have been sent out of the martial sect? How could you have such a fortuitous encounter today? Bah, you still want me to thank you? Keep dreaming. Your achievements today have truly exceeded my expectations. If I knew your true identity earlier, I would have killed you earlier. It's just that your development has far exceeded my expectations, so I want to see just how far your 9-yang saint body can go. Unfortunately, the situation is becoming more and more chaotic. Even the Empyrean Fairy and the 100 Change Star Lord have come out. I have no choice but to take action. Otherwise, if the chaos continues, it will not be good. As for you, I can still let you live because the Azure Dragon Hall has been peaceful for so many years. It is time for you to move around a bit. A blade that has been left out for too long has become blunt and rusty. It needs to be sharpened by a whetstone to become sharper. You are using me as a whetstone. You really are boasting shamelessly. Be careful that I don't break this blade of yours. Tang Zheng was furious. This High Lord gave off an unfathomable feeling. He could not see through him at all. Chapter 857. Through the mask, The High Lord's eyes were filled with a disdainful smile, and said, "A whetstone is a whetstone. In the end, it is difficult to compare with a blade. Tang Zheng, if you retreat quickly, I can spare your life." Phut, wishful thinking. Tang Zheng spat out a mouthful of saliva. The High Lord laughed meaningfully. "Before I kill you, is anyone willing to tell me why you are gathered in the 10,000 huge mountains?" Tang Zheng suddenly realized that the other party did not know the purpose of their trip, nor did he know what happened in the canyon. "You won't know." Tang Zheng cleanly cut off the other party's thoughts. The High Lord did not mind. "I will always have a way to know. If we don't agree, let's get down to business first." With a wave of the High Lord's hand, shua shua shua, the others all rushed out, and in an instant, there were more than 10 blood guillotines in the sky. "Tang Zheng, you killed the Sword God and the Sword 13, so you must know what this is. Today, I'll let you have a taste of it." Blood guillotine. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth. "Everyone be careful. This is a sharp weapon that Enuerha used to deal with cultivators. Many cultivators died under the blood guillotine." "What bullshit blood guillotine? If it wasn't for the sneak attack when I wasn't prepared, how could it have injured me?" The 100 Faces Star Lord roared. "100 Faces Star Lord, you and I are both cultivators. It's not too late to stop fighting after we deal with the people from the Azure Dragon Palace." Tang Zheng suggested loudly, wanting to form an alliance. 100 Faces Star Lord's eyes flickered. He hesitated for a moment, then agreed. "All right, I'll agree to it for the time being." Tang Zheng said in a low voice that only he could hear, "100 Faces Star Lord is very fickle. Even if he agrees, he can't believe it completely, so we have to be on guard against him at all times." Empyrean Fairy looked at Tang Zheng with approval, as if to say that he was not stupid enough to know that the 100 Faces Star Lord was not trustworthy. Hey, what a touching scene. Even sworn enemies can huddle together for warmth. If there are more such cultivators, then this world will really be in chaos. The Great Lord sneered. He moved later, but arrived first. He actually overtook the flying guillotine and pushed his hands forward. An earth-shattering aura swept over. What a powerful skill. Everyone had this thought at the same time. They had fought for an entire night and had consumed a lot of energy. The other side was waiting for them to tire themselves out. Sure enough, they had the upper hand. My non-phase method has not been shown to anyone for many years. Today, you are in for a treat. As soon as the High Lord finished speaking, that earth-shattering aura was already in front of them. The ruins on the ground flew up into the air, whizzing towards the crowd. "Everyone, hide behind me." Tang Zheng roared and waved his hand in the air. The holy armor shield stood in the wind like a pillar, blocking in front of everyone. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign did not seem to want to waste his energy, so he hid behind the holy armor shield as well. However, he deliberately kept a distance from them. Bang, bang, bang. The holy armor shield kept vibrating. Every time it hit, Tang Zheng's heart would beat violently. His blood was almost boiling, and his face and ears were red. Squeak, squeak. Xiao Bai was indignant. In order to share the pressure of Tang Zheng, he jumped up and spat out monstrous flames. The ruins turned into drops of heat in the flames and fell to the ground. The Empyrean Fairy activated the mountain river map. The map's suction force increased greatly, and a whirlwind blew. The ruins were sucked into the mountain river map. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign hid behind the crowd and watched coldly. He had no intention of helping. "Tang Zheng, just take care of yourself. There is no need to be a shield for someone else." Tian Chanzi also shouted and stepped forward. Whoosh, whoosh. A few black shadows suddenly appeared in the sky, the flying guillotine. They arranged themselves in a circle and descended with a whistling sound, aiming for the heads of the people. "Be careful," the Empyrean Fairy yelled. She pointed her finger above her head and shot it at the flying guillotine. However, the flying guillotine was like a slippery loach, cleverly dodging it. The flying guillotine seemed to be scattered, but there was actually a formation among them. They were interchanging with each other and were a whole. Tian Chanzi's eyes lit up. He said, "The flying guillotine is maintained by the formation. If we break this formation, they will naturally fall apart." Formations were not only used by cultivators, but also by martial artists. They could also study formations and use them in martial arts as well as when facing enemies. The Azure Dragon Palace had always been dealing with cultivators. Of course, they would not let go of such a method like formations. The opponents had more than a dozen Grandmaster warriors. If they fought alone, except for Ling Er, they would not be a match for the others. However, when they worked together and cooperated with the formation, their power increased sharply. The Great Lord was not surprised. He mocked, "You saw through my formation. Do you think you can break it?" The sky full of ruins had disappeared. The Great Lord was high in the air, looking down at them. He crossed his fingers and kept changing them. "He is making hand seals." The Empyrean fairy reminded. "Making hand seals? Didn't cultivators make hand seals when they used some secret techniques?" Seeing Tang Zheng's suspicious eyes, Tian Chanzi explained, "Warriors and cultivators are the same. They can make hand seals. This is a common aspect. It's just that there are very few warriors who can make hand seals. This non-phase method is really strange." The Great Lord had finished making hand seals. His fingers crossed into a strange posture. He opened his mouth and a sound came out of his mouth. Bang! It was a simple syllable. It seemed that he had used up all his strength to make this sound. Not only did his chest and abdomen resonate, but this sound resonated with the heaven and earth. It was shocking. This was the first time Tang Zheng had seen this kind of technique, and it was truly inconceivable. He was overwhelmed with shock as he felt a terrifying pressure descend from the heavens. Not only was it exerted on his body, it was also exerted on his spirit. For some reason, his movements slowed down as he watched the flying guillotine descend from the sky. However, he was powerless to stop it even though he had the will. "Damn it!" Tian Chanzi roared. His movements were half a beat slower, but he still wielded the long sword in his hand. Swish! The sword light broke through the sky and hit the flying guillotine. The flying guillotine was covered with a burst of blood, but it was not damaged at all. It was just that the momentum of the attack slowed down, giving Tian Chanzi time to dodge the attack. The Great Lord's attack was not a single attack. It was an indiscriminate and large-scale attack. The others were also affected, especially Ling Er. Her face was pale. The word almost shook her mind. The Fairy of the Nine Heavens and the 100 Transformations Star-Lord were the least affected. The 100 Transformations Star-Lord originally wanted to take advantage of the situation and not contribute if he could. However, as soon as the words were spoken, he knew that he could not stay out of this. "Go!" Empyrean Fairy summoned a flood and rushed to the flying guillotine above Tang Zheng's head. With a bang, the flying guillotine was hit, and Tang Zheng dodged a part of it. As for the flying guillotine that flew to Empyrean Fairy and 100 Faces Star-Lord, it did not hurt them. Although their movements were affected, it was not big. They finally understood that the flying guillotine's power was secondary. The most important thing was that the Great Lord's non-phase method was too strange. Combined with the flying guillotine, the lethality was really amazing. However, before they could catch their breath, the Great Lord opened his mouth again and another word came out. Ma. It was like thunder exploding in their ears, making their heartstrings tremble. An even more terrifying pressure came from all directions. Tang Zheng's face turned as pale as paper. Ling Er had softly fallen to the ground. This time, even Tian Chanzi's mouth twitched. What is the origin of this non-phase method? It's so strange. Empyrean Fairy and 100 Faces Star-Lord looked at each other and realized that this was an unprecedented crisis. If they had not experienced a night of battle, they would not be afraid. But after the battle, this was really a matter of life and death. Their movements also became slow. Ma. They had not yet moved when the third word came out. This time, not only did their movements become slow, but even their thinking was half a beat slower. Once his thoughts slowed down, his actions slowed down even more. It was even more difficult to avoid the flying guillotines that were eyeing him covetously. "For symbols venerable, stop them for me," Tang Zheng growled, but found that the 4 symbols venerable was motionless, as if he had really turned into a stone statue. "What's going on?" Tang Zheng was aghast. Even the four symbols venerable had lost his effect. This non-phase method communicates with heaven and earth. Don't look at it with only a few words and simple syllables. Each syllable can be synchronized with heaven and earth's aura and achieve resonance. This is the key. I don't know who created such a magical technique. It's really a genius. Caillou exclaimed. Don't just praise. Tell me, what should we do? Tang Zheng complained. This non-phase method seems to have a particularly obvious effect on the murderous aura. The four symbols venerable's murderous aura is the strongest, so when it is suppressed by this power, it is like a mountain. Don't count on it. There's a way. Tang Zheng could not help but interrupt. People with pure minds and no murderous intent may not be affected. Caillou hurriedly said. The inner demons snorted. Is there anyone in this world who has no distracting thoughts and a pure mind to such a state? I have seen countless people, but I have never seen such a person. The world is so big, nothing is too strange. Inner demons, your words are too absolute. Caillou retorted. Humph, then you find one for me to see. Caillou was speechless. He sighed and said, this kind of person is really hard to find. However, from my observation, the Venerable Lord's non-phase method has not been used yet. I'm afraid there are other words behind it. As if to confirm his words, another word resounded through heaven and earth. This time, even ordinary people could feel a resonance between heaven and earth. Everyone's face changed. This kind of martial technique was unheard of and unseen. No wonder the Azure Dragon Palace Hall was so confident. They actually had such a big killing weapon. This time, the flying guillotine did not rashly fall down to attack them. It seemed to be brewing, waiting for the final blow. The Venerable Lord was still brewing. Obviously, there was still another move. Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety. He constantly circulated his power to resist this strange power. However, the faster he circulated his power, the more violent the murderous aura in his heart surged. Instead, he felt more pressure. Chapter 858. Killing Intent. Who wouldn't have killing intent? Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety. Suddenly, his gaze landed on Linga, who was lying on the ground, and an idea came to him. Linga's heart was pure, like a piece of white paper. Could she do it? But seeing her in pain on the ground, he had some doubts. But since things had come to this, he could only try his best to fight for that slim chance of survival. Linga, listen to me. Get rid of all distracting thoughts, maintain your original heart, and don't think about anything else. Tang Zheng's voice seemed to have a magical power. Linga gave an en sound and hurriedly did as she was told. Wow, Master, Linga is not feeling bad anymore. Linga stood up, extremely surprised. Her black eyes looked at Tang Zheng curiously, not knowing what was going on. Is there really a person with such a pure heart in this world? The inner demons could not help but exclaim. Caillou suddenly understood and said, I understand. She had experienced a night of battle before, and her body was inevitably contaminated with murderous aura. Her temperament was affected, but her nature was simple and was not really affected, so Tang Zheng asked her to get rid of the distracting thoughts. She drove the contaminated murderous aura out of her body and restored her simple nature. This non-phase method naturally could not hurt her. Hearing that, Tang Zheng was overjoyed. This was truly a pleasant surprise, and immediately shouted, Linga, the enemy's divine arts are extremely strange, this time everyone will have to rely on you. Linga said in disbelief, Master, you guys are so powerful, but you still can't do anything, what can Linga do? Linga, you have to believe in yourself. There are some aspects in which you are stronger than us. Linga was extremely happy, and nodded happily. Really? Linga had always thought that he was a burden, and needed the protection of his master everywhere. Linga is too happy to be able to share master's worries. The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth twitched as he forced out a smile and said, Linga, use this heaven-shocking bow and shooting sun arrows to attack the High Lord. Tang Zheng summoned the two divine weapons and handed them to Linga. Linga held onto the divine weapon, her heart surging as she said, Master, Linga will definitely work hard. The shooting sun arrow was aimed at the High Lord, shining with a cold light. At this moment, The fourth word slipped out of his mouth. Ba. Linga was not affected at all. She pulled the shooting sun arrow into the shape of a full moon. She loosened her fingers and the shooting sun arrow shot through the sky. Fair-faced flying dragon had been watching coldly from the sidelines, waiting for the final moment to deal a fatal blow to his opponent. However, before he could reach the final juncture, he was shocked to find that there was actually one person who was not affected. This person's strength was obviously weaker than the others, but why was she not affected? Before he could figure it out, he saw the person pulling the bow and pulling the arrow. He knew that Tang Jing had a divine bow, and this was definitely that divine bow. Fair-faced flying dragon's face turned pale when he saw the cold gleam of the arrow piercing through the air, aiming straight for the High Lord. Although the High Lord's non-phase method was powerful, when using it, one had to be completely focused. If someone was not affected and counterattacked, it would be fatal. At this moment, the High Lord was like a 3-year-old child, unable to resist at all. This was the shortcoming of the non-phase method, and fair-faced flying dragon was very familiar with it. In the past, the crisis of this shortcoming did not erupt, because once the High Lord used the non-phase method, no one would not be affected. But the strange thing was that this time, there was actually someone who was not affected. The High Lord had instead become a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. High Lord, be careful. Fair-faced flying dragon roared and flew towards the High Lord, trying to intercept the shooting sun arrow. However, when he entered this space, his movements immediately slowed down. This was because he was also affected by this space. However, this shout finally awakened the High Lord, and his eyes suddenly swept towards the shooting sun arrow flying towards him. He wanted to dodge, but he was powerless. He could only watch the shooting sun arrow approach him. With a puff, the shooting sun arrow pierced through his left chest and went through his body. Ah! The High Lord screamed in pain and fell from the air. Everyone felt their bodies loosen, and they regained their freedom. Linga covered her mouth and looked at the scene in disbelief. She did not expect that it would actually succeed and resolve the crisis. Counterattack! Tang Zheng took the opportunity to shout, and stepped forward bravely. The War Soul sword pierced out to meet the flying guillotine in the air. The flying guillotine also attacked with all its might. Puff! With a loud sound, the flying guillotine was split into 2 halves. The person controlling it on the ground spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face darkened. The Empyrean fairy recognized the High Lord, and her figure flashed as she attacked the High Lord. The High Lord clutched his chest, and blood flowed out. His face showed annoyance and disbelief. Obviously, he did not expect that there would be someone who was not affected by his non-phase method. He was already injured, and was not the Empyrean fairy's opponent. He hurriedly retreated, but the Empyrean fairy followed him like a shadow, obviously wanting to get rid of him completely. Stop, you are not allowed to hurt the High Lord. Fair-faced flying dragon roared, and the Tyar sword slashed towards the Empyrean fairy. Facing the Tyar sword, the Empyrean fairy did not dare to take it lightly. After all, it was a sacred tool. Moreover, she was very familiar with the Tyar sword, and knew how powerful it was. If you want to hurt the High Lord, you will have to step over my dead body. Fair-faced flying dragon was dead set on the High Lord, and his attitude was very firm. The Empyrean fairy snorted disapprovingly, and brought out the stately painting. A powerful suction force immediately enveloped fair-faced flying dragon. Fair-faced flying dragon's expression suddenly changed. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fair-faced flying dragon fiercely slashed a few times at the stately painting. The powerful sword Qi stirred the air, trying to break free from the stately painting's restraint. However, it was all in vain. Fair-faced flying dragon was a first-grade martial emperor, which was equivalent to a first-grade Yuanying. There was a huge gap between him and the Empyrean fairy, who was in the divine transformation realm. He could not resist at all. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign involuntarily rose into the air and flew towards the stately painting. No matter how he struggled, it was futile. Seeing this, the High Lord gritted his teeth and spat out the word "Mi." The Empyrean fairy's movements were sluggish. Fair-faced flying dragon immediately broke free and landed on the ground, holding the High Lord. The High Lord weakly shouted, "Retreat!" Fair-faced flying dragon madly rushed into the forest, and his voice came from afar, "The flying guillotine is behind, stop them." In order to buy time for the High Lord to escape, he did not hesitate to sacrifice the flying guillotine. Change formation. More than a dozen martial masters shouted in unison. The flying guillotine changed formation in mid-air, and they shuttled back and forth. Their figures flickered, making it difficult to see clearly. Attack! With a loud shout, more than a dozen flying guillotine attacked the few people at once. They hummed and spun non-stop, like bloody mouths that were choosing people to devour. A group of dragons without a leader, yet you still dare to provoke me. Humph, I'll kill you first and let you know the consequences of sneak attacking me. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign roared and rushed over. The celestial water banner shook, and a torrential flood appeared out of thin air, hitting the flying guillotine and breaking the formation. Once the formation was broken, more than a dozen martial masters were immediately revealed, and they were flustered. The 100 Faces Star Sovereign rushed in and killed 2 people with just a few moves. However, the 100 Faces Star Sovereign did not stop and rushed into the forest in the blink of an eye. He's trying to escape, Tang Zheng shouted, wanting to chase after him, but was stopped by a few martial masters. Damn it, get out of the way. Tang Zheng roared in exasperation, but the few of them were like a human wall, blocking in front of him, making it impossible for him to pass through. Forget it, let's take care of these people first. After the Empyrean fairy finished speaking, she displayed her divine might, and Tian Chanzi and the 4 symbols venerable did not hold back either, killing in all directions. The group of martial masters finally could not hold on any longer. Under the circumstances of paying the price of a few lives, they fled in all directions. Obviously, they knew that if they fled together, their chances of survival would be even slimmer. If they scattered and fled in all directions, there would always be someone who would be lucky enough to escape. This method was extremely rare. Tang Zheng had too few people on his side, and in the end, a few of them escaped. Tang Zheng did not care about these small fries, but in his heart, he gradually understood that there was a discrepancy in the information he searched in Jian Shisan's mind. It said that the flying guillotine was invincible, and many cultivators had died in their hands. Now it seemed that the flying guillotine was powerful, but that was because they had not faced experts like the Empyrean Fairy and the 100 Faces Star Sovereign. Otherwise, the flying guillotine could only flee in all directions. Perhaps, the flying guillotine had to cooperate with the Venerable Lord to display its great power. Just like just now, if Linga had not insisted on coming together, then they would definitely have been in big trouble, and even had their heads cut off by the flying guillotine. Therefore, the rumors of the flying guillotine were not all nonsense. This was then, and now, and the situation was different. Let's continue to chase after the Venerable Lord. Tang Zheng did not want to let the tiger return to the mountain, and said decisively. Several people agreed. They all had a lingering fear of his non-phase method, so they really wanted to leave him in the 100,000 mountains. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Several people shuttled through the forest, like ghosts, their speed was beyond imagination. Suddenly, the sound of fighting rang out in front of them. They were overjoyed and chased after it. However, they only saw a figure fleeing far away. It was obviously the multiform Star Sovereign. There were many corpses on the ground, and only one person was left standing. However, his body was dripping with blood, and he was in a sorry state. Long Shenyuan. Tang Zheng was secretly shocked. He recognized that the other party was actually the patriarch of the Long family, and those who died were probably also from the Long family. Why would the Long family be in the 100,000 mountains? Seeing Tang Zheng looking at him with an unfriendly expression, Long Xuanyuan's heart jumped wildly. This time, it was a very risky move for him to enter the 100,000 mountains. Although he grew up near the 100,000 mountains, his elders had warned him not to set foot in the 100,000 mountains. This time, he realized that Tang Zheng's purpose in coming to Dianan was not simple. In addition, Tang Zheng rushed into the 100,000 mountains in a hurry. He guessed that something big must have happened, so on a whim, he brought people to chase after him. What he discovered along the way was an eye-opener and a deep shock. However, before he could find Tang Zheng, he found a person holding a masked man in a hurry and slipped away from them in the blink of an eye. Long Shenyuan was shocked. There was actually such a strong martial artist, but before he could say a few more words, he realized that another child had rushed over. This child actually did not distinguish between right and wrong, and directly started killing his people. Of course, he wanted to stop it, but found that it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, after the child killed his men, before he could kill him, he was chased by the pursuers. In the next second, he saw that the pursuer was actually Tang Zheng. Chapter 859. Their eyes met, and Tang Zheng and Long Shenyuan looked at each other in disbelief. "Why are you here?" Tang Zheng's expression changed slightly, his two sword-like eyebrows were raised high, and he asked straightforwardly. He subconsciously thought of the conflict with Long Tungfei in Dianan. The Long family didn't have any reaction, so he didn't care too much. Now that he saw Long Shenyuan in the 10,000 mountains, he naturally thought that the other party was here for him. Long Xuanyuan's expression was complicated. The people he brought were all wiped out, and then he met Tang Zheng and the others. He knew that if he said something wrong, it would lead to serious consequences. Tang Zheng's strength was far superior to his. No one would know if he killed him in this desolate 10,000 mountains. Some time ago, there was a huge earthquake in the 10,000 mountains. I guessed that there must be a problem, so I came to investigate. Long Shenyuan replied without hesitation. This was indeed one of his goals. Who is he? Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi looked at Long Shenyuan lightly, not putting him in their eyes at all. Long Shenyuan also felt this contempt, but he didn't dare to refute. He had already guessed the identity of these two people. One was Tian Chanzi, and the other was the mysterious woman who helped him kill the sword god. Even though Long Shenyuan had seen enough big battles in his life, he still couldn't help but feel nervous when he saw these two people. "I am Long Shenyuan of the Dianan Long family." Long Shenyuan introduced himself modestly. When Tian Chanzi heard this, he didn't have much of a reaction at all. He said directly, "Why are we wasting time here? Hurry up and chase after the 100 Faces Star Lord. If we let him escape, it will be like looking for a needle in a haystack." The 100 Faces Star Lord was proficient in transformation techniques and could transform into anyone. This was a skill that the 100 Faces Star Lord had never used before, so they were quite afraid. "There's no need to chase," Empyrean Fairy suddenly said. "He has already escaped into the vast 10,000 mountains. There is nowhere to find him." Tian Chanzi glared at Long Shenyuan with an unfriendly expression. Long Shenyuan felt as if he had been locked onto by the god of death, and a sense of fear involuntarily rose in his heart. It's all his fault. If he hadn't delayed us, the 100 Transformation Star Sovereign definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. Tian Chanzi said coldly. Long Shenyuan wanted to defend himself, but he found that he was not confident enough. But in the end, he took a deep breath and mustered up his courage. He said hesitantly, "Senior, is that child called the 100 Change Star Lord? Actually, we can be considered to have delayed him a little." Although he lived in the vicinity of the 100,000 mountains, he did not know of the great name of the 100 Transformation Star Lord like the Azure Dragon Hall and the Li Palace. However, for a child to be called the 100 Transformation Star Lord and be so feared by these people, he was definitely not an ordinary person. Although he had doubts in his heart, he still tried his best to explain himself. He was deeply afraid that the other party would really put all the blame on him. "You still dare to quibble?" Tian Chanzi shouted angrily. Although he was usually very gentle to Tian Chanzi, and even a little disrespectful to him, when facing the unfamiliar Long Shenyuan, he was still very imposing, causing people to not dare to resist. Long Shenyuan didn't know how to respond, and the fear in his heart grew stronger and stronger. At this point, he finally understood that no matter what grudges he had with Tang Zheng had already left him far behind. If he recklessly wanted to take revenge, he was afraid that he would be the first to die, and then the unlucky ones would be the Long family. In fact, Long Shenyuan was very clear about what his son, Long Tungyu, had done. It was impossible to say that Long Tengyu's death had nothing to do with Tang Zheng, but it was a bit far-fetched to say that it had too much to do with him. Long Tengyu was actually reaping what he had sown and had only himself to blame. Although Long Shenyuan was very unwilling to admit this, he knew that this was the cruel reality. He was smarter than the other patriarchs in that he wouldn't go to a dead end. Such a long time was enough for him to calm down and think clearly about the cause and effect. If he wasn't such a person, he wouldn't have trusted Mu Hongyang so much and handed over all the properties of the Long family to her, letting her, a person with a different surname, take care of them. Moreover, Tang Zheng had actually done a favor to the Long family, and Nana's life was saved by Tang Zheng. If he stubbornly dealt with Tang Zheng, not only would it be of no benefit to the Long family, it would also be ungrateful. As for Long Tengfei's death, how could the life and death of a side-branch rice bucket affect Long Xuanyuan's heart much? If it was said that before he entered the 10,000 mountains this time, he still had some hope in his heart to see if he could create some trouble for Tang Zheng, but at this moment, this kind of thought had completely disappeared. He had already made up his mind to write off his grudge with Tang Zheng. He had saved Nana's life and Long Tengyu's death had cancelled each other out. But the crisis in front of him was that Tian Chanzi seemed to have blamed him for the escape of the 100 Faces Star-Lord, causing him to be in trouble. Looking at Long Xuanyuan's twitching mouth, Tang Zheng couldn't help but think of Nana. After all, the other party was Nana's grandfather. Moreover, both of his sons had already died, so he was indeed a pitiful person. As for the Long family, Tang Zheng didn't think that they could threaten him now. Therefore, whether it was for the sake of Nana or Mu Hongyang, he was prepared to let Long Shenyuan go. Tang Zheng coughed and stood up. Long Shenyuan looked at him in shock, not knowing what he was going to do. He was terrified to find that not only was he facing Heaven Monk, even he was facing Tang Zheng, he was actually feeling fear in his heart, as if he was looking at a tall mountain. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He was really old, and he had to admit that he was old. Patriarch Long, I don't know why you entered the 10,000 mountains this time, but the 10,000 mountains is not a place you should come to. I'm sure you have experienced the danger just now. However, if you want to target me, you have to think twice before you act. For the sake of Nana and Sister Mu, I will not pursue this matter. Please do as you wish. Tang Zheng said. Seeing that Tang Zheng didn't pursue the matter, Long Shenyuan heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't wait to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead and said, Tang Zheng, you misunderstood. I definitely didn't mean to target you. As for the grudge between you and the Long family, I have thought it through. Nana and Hongyang have been taken care of by you. I haven't personally thanked you yet. There's no need to thank me. Sister Mu has helped me a lot. Moreover, I like Nana very much. I have always treated her as a sister. Long Shenyuan heaved a sigh of relief. He really didn't have any resentment. He asked nervously, then can I go and see Nana in the future? The older generation valued the inheritance of the family very much. Long Shenyuan only had one descendant left, Nana. In his heart, he missed her very much. Tang Zheng occasionally heard Nana mention her grandfather. He knew that Long Shenyuan had always treated her well. After pondering for a while, he agreed. This was Long Xuanyuan's right. You are Nana's grandfather? The Empyrean fairy suddenly asked. Long Shenyuan was even more nervous when facing the Empyrean fairy. He knew that this was the fierce person who killed the sword god. He hurriedly bowed slightly and said, Yes. Nana is my disciple. The Empyrean fairy simply said this sentence and didn't say anything else. Long Xuanyuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He looked at the Empyrean fairy in disbelief. His granddaughter was actually a disciple of this person. This was really the Long family's fortune. Immediately, he bowed deeply to the Empyrean fairy and said, It is the fortune of 3 lifetimes for Nana to be able to enter your sect. This old man thanks you. The Empyrean fairy looked at him indifferently and said, I accepted her as my disciple because of her talent. It has nothing to do with you and the Long family. Yes, yes. Long Shenyuan hurriedly nodded and didn't dare to refute. But this is also a great fortune of the Long family. "Can I ask you to let me play host after you leave the 10,000 mountains?" I said, "This has nothing to do with you." The Empyrean fairy refused. Long Shenyuan didn't dare to persuade again, but the wrinkles at the corner of his eyes were filled with joy. Suddenly, his heart moved, and he pointed in a direction and said, "There is an injured person going in that direction. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Heaven Monk snorted angrily, and rushed out as if he was flying. Tang Zheng and the others no longer cared about Long Shenyuan, and shot out. Since they couldn't catch up with the 100 Faces Star Sovereign, they would chase after the Azure Dragon Hall's High Lord and fair-faced Flying Dragon. These two people would definitely escape from the 10,000 mountains. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. Long Shenyuan put away the shock on his face, hesitated for a moment, and also chased after them. This time, he didn't want to deal with Tang Zheng, but wanted to see what he could do to help. The change in his way of thinking allowed both sides to bury the hatchet, and also gave himself and the Long family a chance to live. The few of them were as fast as lightning, shuttling through the dense forest. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy shouted, "There is the smell of blood in this direction." The High Lord was injured, and the smell of blood was definitely the High Lord's. The few of them were shocked and chased forward. Sure enough, they saw a figure in front of them. It wasn't the High Lord or fair-faced Flying Dragon, but a member of the Flying Guillotine who had escaped earlier. The other party didn't seem to be surprised by the arrival of the pursuers. Instead, the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of complacency. "You want to kill the High Lord? Dream on. It seems that you guys expected us to chase after you, so you deliberately used this method to lure us here. In fact, the High Lord and fair-faced Flying Dragon have already escaped to God knows where, right?" Tang Zheng saw through the other party's thoughts with a glance. The other party's eyes fluctuated violently, but he didn't say anything. Tang Zheng understood. As expected, he guessed correctly. This High Lord was too smart. However, his left chest was pierced by the shooting sun arrow, and his heart should have been hit as well. Why wasn't he dead yet? Tang Zheng guessed that the other party must have a special life-saving method. Capture him alive. Tang Zheng decided to capture him alive and use the soul search to search for more information about the Azure Dragon Palace. The other party's expression changed greatly. He didn't resist, but raised his hand and slapped his own head. With the other party's strength, his head would probably explode like a ripe watermelon. "You want to die in front of me? Not so easy." Tang Zheng learned from Jian Shisan's mistake, so he couldn't let the other party succeed. He stretched out his arm and used the swallowing heaven technique. A black hole appeared in his palm, and immediately sucked the other party into his palm and controlled him. Chapter 860. Tang Zheng controlled the man and was about to use the soul-searching technique when he found that the other party had a sneer on his face. He was startled, and a bad premonition hit his heart. Sure enough, the other party's head tilted and he died. Under his control, the corner of his mouth overflowed with a trace of black blood. Poisoned. Tang Zheng suddenly realized and pried open his mouth. Sure enough, he was poisoned. Although Tang Zheng controlled him, he still triggered the poison and died immediately, not giving Tang Zheng a chance. A great master martial artist was actually willing to give up his life like this. Tang Zheng was extremely shocked. A great master martial artist was an extremely important existence to a family, but this person actually sacrificed himself without hesitation. What kind of existence was the Azure Dragon Palace that they could train such a person? Tang Zheng was shocked. He loosened his hand and the other party fell to the ground. After such a delay, it was impossible for them to catch up to the High Lord, so they simply gave up on the chase. The others looked at this scene and were deeply shocked. Tian Chanzi said, "The Azure Dragon Palace will be our biggest threat. If we don't get rid of them, one day it will lead to a disaster." The Empyrean fairy added, "The phaseless method is even more strange and unpredictable. I feel that the power of the phaseless method has not been fully exerted. Otherwise, I'm afraid its power would be even greater, and it would be even more disadvantageous for us. Therefore, we must figure out what kind of martial arts the phaseless method is." After saying that, she looked at Ling in surprise. She was the only one who was not affected by the phaseless method, so the breakthrough was naturally on her. Linga looked at the Empyrean fairy blankly. Although she turned the situation around with her own strength, she was not clear about what was going on. Tang Zheng knew that the Empyrean fairy had not figured out the reason for the phaseless method, so he explained, "The horror of the phaseless method is that it affects almost everyone. As long as a person has murderous intent and hostility, and their heart is not completely pure, it is difficult to be an exception." "What did you say? Who told you that?" The Empyrean fairy was shocked. "Caillou." The Empyrean fairy fell silent. Tian Chanz's eyes also revealed a look of disbelief as he said, "We've been through so many battles, and the murderous aura has long since seeped into our bones. Even if it is an ordinary person, it is impossible to have a completely pure mind. The power of this non-phase method is too terrifying." Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. From this, it can be seen that this Azure Dragon Palace is indeed not just an empty name, but the real deal. "I understand. Linga is a ginseng, and her mind is pure enough to not be affected by the non-phase method. I didn't expect that she would be the one to save us this time." The Empyrean fairy had mixed feelings. Linga looked at everyone blankly. She didn't realize that she had such a big role. Looking at her ignorant appearance, Tang Zheng smiled and said, "Linga, this time everyone was saved by you. Now you know how powerful you are, right?" Linga shook her head like a rattledrum, and said nervously, "Master, Linga is not as powerful as you say. Without you, Linga would not have been able to do this. Don't be modest. In addition, did you notice that when the Great Lord used the non-phase method, although we were all affected, he was also helpless and couldn't use other attacks? He had to rely on the flying guillotine to attack us. In addition, anyone who entered his attack range would be attacked indiscriminately. Therefore, the fair-faced flying dragon failed to save him." The Empyrean fairy pointed out. Therefore, the Great Lord and the flying guillotine complemented each other. This is the most fatal method of the Azure Dragon Hall. Tian Chanzi concluded. Tang Zheng nodded, admitting that what the two said was true. He added, "Therefore, to deal with the Great Lord, we have to rely on Linga." Suddenly, the three people focused their eyes on Linga. Linga felt an inexplicable pressure, and said nervously, "Don't look at me, I'm really not that powerful." "Linga, don't belittle yourself. Be confident," Tang Zheng urged. "Oh. But the most important point is that Linga's mind cannot be changed by pollution. Otherwise, facing the non-phase method will be in vain," the Empyrean fairy said. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi both nodded. This was the most important thing. To keep a person's heart, especially in this materialistic society, it was much more difficult than cultivating martial arts. "Linga, did you hear that?" Tang Zheng asked. Linga nodded hesitantly. "This is Master's order. Linga will definitely do it. It's not enough to rely on her own efforts. We have to make the people around her reliable enough. We can't let her hands be stained with the slightest bit of blood and evil aura," the Empyrean fairy said. Tang Zheng had to admit that the Empyrean fairy was very thoughtful. Although it was very difficult, he still had to do it. Linga was like a national treasure that must be protected in all aspects, and not only to protect her from harm. "I will order Yi Yuan to lead the elites of the witch clan back." Tang Zheng didn't think that Remi and the others could do this. They could do business, but they couldn't do anything about these things. In the past, he was afraid that the authorities or the Azure Dragon Palace would deal with the witch clan, so he placed them and the people of the martial sect on the island. Now that he had the Empyrean fairy, at least the authorities wouldn't dare to act rashly. In addition, he had another layer of consideration. After all, the witch clan was the core of the Jolie tribe. Caillou had awakened again. If he didn't tighten his close relationship with the witch clan, if one day Caillou left his body, would he take the witch clan back under his command? Tang Zheng didn't want the witch clan to be taken back under Caillou's command. Then he would summon the witch clan back and let them stay by his side to deepen the relationship between them. Of course, there was no need to make this thought public. Although Caillou and the inner demons were in his body, Tang Zheng's strength was no longer the same as before. His spirit was strong, so the two of them were unable to detect his thoughts. He was not afraid that Caillou would know. In fact, even if he knew, Caillou couldn't do anything about it. It's best that you have your own arrangements. Linga is the most important, we can't lose her. Empyrean Fairy emphasized. Whiz. Long Shenyuan also caught up. Seeing the corpse on the ground, the corner of his mouth twitched a few times. Seeing that the few of them were looking over, he quickly said, Tang Linga, Miss Tang, has encountered some problems with the official cooperation with Dianan. I have a way to solve it. He did not hear the conversation between the few of them just now. It was purely to deepen the relationship between them. Tang Zheng was also clear about this, but he did not make a decision immediately. Instead, he looked at Linga. Linga understood and said, Master, you make the decision. Linga will listen to you. Linga, this is your job. What do you think? Linga looked around and said, the scenery of Dianan is beautiful, and there are 10,000 mountains. Although it is dangerous, Linga also likes the environment here, so the cooperation with Dianan is quite good. It seemed that Linga really liked Dianan. Tang Jing nodded and said, then it's up to you. You will be the tourism ambassador. Long Shenyuan was overjoyed and promised, everyone, please rest assured. This matter will be done as soon as possible. Originally, Linga came for the cooperation, but the matter with Long Tongfei caused it to be ruined. With Long Xuanyuan's power, this was a small matter. Of course, he could turn the situation around. Linga smiled sweetly and politely nodded to Long Shenyuan to thank him. The monsters in the 10,000 mountains are either dead or have fled. The threat has been mostly eliminated. As for the 100 Faces Star-Lord, it will be very difficult to find him, so there is no need to stay here. Tang Jing said. Empyrean Fairy glanced at Long Shenyuan. Long Shenyuan was very smart and immediately retreated far away. He knew that they had something to talk about and did not want him to know. Although he was curious, he did not dare to eavesdrop. I want to go to Mount Buzhou to take a look. Empyrean Fairy said that before coming, Tang Zheng had already told her about Mount Buzhou and the 100 Faces Star-Lord. She was naturally very curious. The 100 Faces Star-Lord is definitely not in Mount Buzhou. Tang Zheng said. I'm not looking for him, I'm looking for Mount Buzhou. Empyrean Fairy insisted. Alright, let's go to Mount Buzhou. Tang Zheng was actually not too willing to expose Mount Buzhou in front of too many people. After all, Mount Buzhou was related to the Heaven Stairway, and furthermore, Yang Qingyi's prophecy also involved Mount Buzhou. However, Empyrean Fairy was not an outsider, so he had no way to refuse this request. Patriarch Long, let's part ways here. You don't have to follow us anymore, understand? Tang Zheng called Long Shenyuan over and warned him. Long Shenyuan understood that the other party was going to do something secretive. If he continued to follow them, he would be asking for trouble. He promised and said that he would immediately go back and prepare for Linga's tourism ambassador. After bidding farewell to each other, Tang Zheng and the rest rushed towards Mount Buzhou and entered the prehistoric heavenly tomb once again. Occasionally, there would be monsters appearing, but they were extremely weak. When they saw these people, they would run in all directions. The demonic beasts were not idiots. Even their master, the 100 Faces Star-Lord, had failed, so how could they dare to compete with Tang Zheng and the rest? Tian Chanzi looked at the messy prehistoric heavenly tomb, especially the tombstones that had fallen to the ground. Tian Chanzi sighed with emotion. I'm afraid that even in their dreams, these experts would never have thought that they would suffer such a great crime after death. This 100 Faces Star-Lord is truly too despicable. I'm guessing that the 100 Faces Star-Lord will probably leave the 10,000 huge mountains. There's nothing left for him here. In the future, he could be anyone, and the threat to us would be even greater. Tang Zheng sighed faintly. How could everyone not know this? But there was nothing they could do. Gradually, Mount Buzhou appeared in their line of sight. It was covered in white snow and the mountainside was shrouded in clouds, making it impossible to see through. Empyrean Fairy stared blankly at Mount Buzhou, and said, When I was young, I heard my father mention Mount Buzhou, but at that time, Mount Buzhou was already broken, and no one knew where Mount Buzhou was. I never thought that it would actually be hidden here. Mount Buzhou is connected to the sky beyond heaven. If we rebuild the heaven stairway, we can go to the sky beyond heaven and bring the others back. Tian Chanzi had always been thinking about this matter. Chapter 861. Tian Chanzi had never forgotten about the stairway to heaven. He looked at Tang Zheng and said, "You've been looking for dark stones of heaven and earth. How many have you collected so far?" "More than 60 pieces. Tang Zheng did not want to lie to Tian Chanzi, so he told the truth. Tian Chanzi looked excited and said, "Where did you collect so many dark stones of heaven and earth?" "The South Sea." Tian Chanzi nodded slightly. "I didn't expect that there would be so many dark stones of heaven and earth hidden in the sea. If we can find the remaining dark stones of heaven and earth, then the day of rebuilding the stairway to heaven will be just around the corner." Tang Zheng did not tell him the whole truth. If Tian Chanzi knew that there were dark stones of heaven and earth under the imperial palace, he would definitely rush back without stopping. However, he was still one step away from the soul formation stage. The Empyrean fairy was not willing to help. Even if she knew, she could only sigh and feel powerless, which would only increase her worries. "I've always heard about the outer sky, but I've never really been there. If there's a chance, I want to go there," the Empyrean fairy suddenly said. When Tang Zheng heard this, he had the impulse to immediately let her release the 5-clawed golden dragon. Then, he could take out the dark stones of heaven and earth, rebuild the stairway to heaven and go to the outer sky. But in the end, he held back and said, "The outer sky is definitely not a very good place. The 100 Faces Star Lord has sent many people to explore the outer sky in ancient times, but none of them returned. You can imagine how dangerous the outer sky is. Besides, if the outer sky is really so good, the demon race would not have tried to return to our world." The Empyrean fairy looked at Tang Zheng in a daze. After thinking for a while, she nodded, "That makes sense. Tang Zheng, you're quite smart. The 100 Faces Star Lord is not wrong. In the past, many people were sent to the stairway to heaven, but there was no news of them," Kaiyu suddenly said. Tang Zheng then remembered that Kaiyu was one of the people involved in that year. He hurriedly asked, "Is there any special information about the realm beyond heaven? You already know that there are big and small worlds in this world. I reckon that beyond heaven is another world, and the situation within it is completely unpredictable. With your current strength, trying to force your way into the outer sky is not a wise decision," Kaiyu warned. Tang Zheng inwardly agreed. He was even more determined not to take out the heaven and earth obsidian under the imperial city for the time being. The group climbed up the snow-capped mountain road. The cold wind whistled. The outside world was in the middle of a scorching summer, but here, it was a world of ice and snow, like the 12th lunar month. Mount Buzhou was still enveloped by the enchantment and isolated from the outside world. Tang Zheng was familiar with the process and easily broke through the enchantment. Behind the enchantment was another world. The spring breeze was as warm as spring, and the flowers, birds, grass, and insects were full of vitality. Back then, the 100 Transformation Star Sovereign lived in this barrier, but this barrier could not stop him. He could come and go as he pleased. The Empyrean fairy looked at this world and clicked her tongue in admiration. "Mount Buzhou is really magical. There are so many sights. Master, doesn't this look like the paradise described in the books? The scenery is so beautiful," Linga said with her eyes wide open. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. "This is not a paradise. 100 Transformation Star Sovereign used to live here. It was very dangerous." Linga pursed her lips and said, "It's such a pity that such a bad person lived here. But he definitely doesn't live here now." Tang Zheng said that 100 Transformation Star Sovereign was imprisoned here for tens of thousands of years. Once he escaped, he would definitely not be willing to step foot here again. "In the future, we will live in the 100,000 mountains. We can also come here occasionally to play." Linga looked forward to it. After a while, they arrived at the small wooden house where 100 Transformation Star Sovereign used to live. However, it had become a pile of ruins and was no longer peaceful. Back then, the furthest Tang Zheng's group had come was here. Later on, They were chased by 100 transformation star sovereign and had no time to explore the other places of Mount Buzhou. Tang Zheng gave a simple introduction. The Empyrean fairy nodded secretly and said, "Then let's continue forward. We haven't reached the peak yet." Tang Zheng was moved. He also wanted to explore the peak and gladly accepted. The group continued forward. The scenery along the way became more and more beautiful. It was truly a scene of paradise. Suddenly, a thick fog shrouded the front, blocking everyone's path. "This fog is strange." The Empyrean fairy frowned. "Amazing, you can see it with a single glance." Tang Zheng praised. He walked straight to the fog and waved his hand. The fog also surged as if it was alive. "This is a formation?" Tian Chanzi asked hesitantly. After the stairway to heaven was destroyed, the peak was sealed by a formation. Normal people can't reach it. "This is what Kai Yu told me," Tang Zheng explained. The method to break the formation was naturally from Kai Yu. As soon as he finished speaking, the fog was pushed aside and retreated to the sides. A strong wind blew, causing them to sway and almost lose their balance. "Everyone be careful. This peak is not simple. It's very dangerous," Tang Zheng warned. He held Linger's hand and said, "Linger, follow me." Linger smiled sweetly. She held Tang Zheng's hand tightly and followed him obediently. The strong wind was biting cold. The aura of heaven and earth had become very chaotic. It was completely different from the previous fragrance of flowers and birds. It was as if they had entered another world. This Mount Buzhou was really strange. The foot of the mountain, the middle of the mountain, and the peak were three completely different scenes. It was like three different worlds. If a normal person came to the peak, they would have been blown away by the strong wind and fallen off the cliff to their death. They didn't walk very far before they found that the path beneath their feet had become dangerous. There were cliffs on both sides. There was only a straight path in the middle. The path went straight up and stopped abruptly after a few dozen meters. "We've reached the peak," Tang Zheng said. Although Kai Yu had described this scene to him before, he was still shocked when he saw it with his own eyes. Tang Zheng had been to Sky Mountain before, but Mount Buzhou seemed to be closer to the sky. They were only one step away from reaching the sky. It was really within reach. The few of them stared at the end of the path. The Empyrean fairy said, "Is that where the stairway to heaven broke?" "Yes. If we follow that path to rebuild the stairway to heaven, we can reach the sky beyond heaven." Tang Zheng pointed to the end of the path and said. Linger looked at the sky blankly and asked, "Linger has also been on a plane. It's higher than here. Why didn't I see the sky beyond heaven?" The Empyrean fairy looked deeply at her and said, "The sky beyond heaven isn't really in the sky. It's another world. The stairway to heaven is the key to opening that other world. I'm guessing that there's a formation in the stairway to heaven or something like that that can trigger the passage to the sky beyond heaven. It doesn't mean that one can only go to the sky beyond heaven by ascending to the sky beyond heaven." Linger didn't fully understand and looked blankly at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, understood. He was deeply impressed and said, "You are right. The heaven stairway is the key and door to the sky beyond heaven. As for why it has such an effect, even Kai Yu is not clear about it. How did the stairway to heaven come about?" Tang Zheng had already asked Kai Yu this question and answered, "The stairway to heaven was accidentally discovered by someone. As for its origin, no one knows." Well, it seemed that the stairway to heaven was as mysterious as the sky beyond heaven. If they wanted to solve all of this, they would have to rebuild the stairway to heaven. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi looked at the mountain peak in front of them with burning eyes. It was as if they were imagining the scene after the stairway to heaven was rebuilt. Tian Chanzi waved his fist and said, "No matter how dangerous the sky beyond heaven is, as long as I'm alive, I will definitely explore it." Tang Zheng looked deeply at him. Tang Zheng was also curious about the sky beyond heaven, but he wasn't that interested at the moment. The Empyrean fairy seemed to be a little unwilling and leaped into the air. Like a dancing butterfly, she flew straight up into the sky. The astral wind in front of her became more and more biting cold. It blew her hair up and her body swayed along with it. Suddenly, her body became sluggish and stopped helplessly. Then, as if she had received a huge recoil, she had no choice but to retreat. She staggered to the ground and almost fell off the mountain peak. Whoosh! She took a deep breath and said, "There's something strange up ahead." "What's strange?" the others asked curiously. "The aura between heaven and earth is completely chaotic. The astral wind is very overbearing and there's a mysterious force that's preventing me from moving forward and pushing me back," the Empyrean fairy said with a dignified expression. The others' expressions changed and said, "Is it really that strange?" Looking at the Empyrean fairy's expression, it was obvious that all of this was true. This place was connected to the sky beyond heaven and was indeed not an ordinary place. This is the place where two worlds are connected. Everything can't be judged by common sense. This is our world, but it also has some of the attributes of the sky beyond heaven. Moreover, this astral wind is very strange. Look at the direction of the wind and it seems to be blowing from the sky. I suspect that it's directly blown from the sky beyond heaven," the Empyrean fairy said with deep feelings. Tian Chanzi looked deeply at the sky and said resolutely, "I'll go up and take a look too." Whoosh! He leaped into the air, but before he could reach the place where the Empyrean fairy was, he was blown away by the astral wind and directly fell back in shock. "I agree with your judgment. This astral wind is indeed strange. It's very likely that it's blown from the sky beyond heaven." Tian Chanzi agreed. Tang Zheng frowned and pondered. Suddenly, he had an idea and said, "Since this is the place where two worlds are connected, if there's no stairway to heaven, can we rush through here and reach the sky beyond heaven?" The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi looked at each other and shook their heads at the same time. They smiled bitterly and said, "We can't. Why don't you give it a try? Your cultivations are so much higher than mine. If you can't do it, it's even more impossible for me." Tang Zheng shook his head helplessly. This was whimsical. How could it be so easy? If it was really that easy, after the stairway to heaven was destroyed, there would be no one who could reach the sky beyond heaven from here. "Master, you should give it a try. If they can't do it, it doesn't mean that you can't," Linga encouraged. In her eyes, Tang Zheng seemed to be omnipotent. Squeak squeak. Little White also nodded in agreement at the side. Tang Zheng was moved by their words and changed his mind. Chapter 862. Tang Zheng circulated his power, and the genuine qi flowed smoothly through the meridians in his body. With a slight tap of his toes, he rushed into the sky like a cheetah. Whoosh! An even more piercingly cold wind blew past his ears, causing his cheeks to hurt. Moreover, from the unseen world, a mysterious force came head-on, trying to stop him. Roar! He let out a deep roar and hurriedly circulated his true qi in an attempt to resist this power. However, this power was too strong and there was nowhere to vent it. His body was about to fall back. He was quick-witted, and hurriedly used the sky-swallowing technique. 2 black holes appeared in his palms, and the power was actually absorbed by the black holes. With the resistance greatly reduced, he leaped up again and actually flew against the current, flying even further than the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi looked at each other in shock. How did he do it? At the same time, they couldn't help but look forward to seeing if Tang Zheng could find anything. Or perhaps, he had really found the world beyond heaven. Tang Zheng also became excited. He also thought of this possibility. If they could really enter the outland, then wouldn't there be no need for the stairway to heaven? The strong wind was like a knife, and it actually cut open a wound on his cheek. It was extremely painful, but he quickly gritted his teeth and endured it. He continued to circulate his power, hoping to reach even further. A ripple suddenly appeared in the blue sky, and a change occurred. A barbaric scene entered his eyes. This, before he had time to think, a loud roar pierced through his eardrums. He saw an incomparably large bird flying over from the horizon. Rumble. Unknown ferocious beasts were running on the ground. The towering trees were broken by the ferocious beasts. In the huge forest, the ferocious beasts drew a long black line. There were actually over 100 of them. These ferocious beasts were larger than most of the beasts that Tang Zheng had seen before. Furthermore, they were ferocious and terrifying. However, they seemed to be very afraid and were running away from something. That big bird. Tang Zheng's eyes flashed as he looked at the massive bird in the sky. It was even bigger than any plane in the world, and when it spread its wings, it was at least 1,000 meters long. Whoosh! The big bird flapped its wings, and a tornado appeared between heaven and earth. The big bird swooped down like a fighter jet, and the sound of breaking through the air was like thunder. In the blink of an eye, over 100 ferocious beasts on the ground were defeated by him in a single move. Countless were killed or injured, and then they were swallowed into his big mouth and disappeared. A 7-colored light flashed on the bird's body. When the light dispersed, the bird disappeared without a trace. Tang Zheng was dumbfounded. His mouth was about to be stuffed with a duck egg. The shock that this scene gave him was unimaginable. It was more shocking than any battle he had ever encountered. Perhaps only the Battle of Zhuelu that he had seen in Kai Yu's illusion could be compared to this. His vision gradually expanded. In the distance, he saw a majestic city. This city was so huge that he couldn't see the end of it with a single glance. There was a terrifying might within the city. Moreover, at the center of the city, a pillar of light rushed into the horizon, connecting heaven and earth. This pillar of light seemed to contain an extremely mysterious power, which made people feel reverence. Tang Zheng wanted to take a closer look. Suddenly, the scene in front of him fluctuated and disappeared. It became a blue sky again. His figure paused, and he was blown back by the strong wind. Tian Chanzi hurriedly caught him and said with concern, "Be careful. What did you find? Why are you so distracted?" The Empyrean fairy also looked at him with burning eyes, waiting for his answer. Tang Zheng muttered to himself for a while, digesting the shocking scene, and said, "I saw something." "What?" Previously, Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy didn't find anything. Hearing this, they were shocked, happy, and curious. Tang Zheng described what he saw in detail. Suddenly, he asked, "Did you hear those sounds just now?" The two shook their heads at the same time. "No, we only heard the sound of the wind." "Since you're the only one who saw those images, it seems that only you can hear those sounds. Do you think those images are from the sky beyond heaven?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. This was the thought that came to him when he saw the scene just now. "It should be." The two said in unison, "Since this is the passage to the sky beyond heaven, it's not impossible to occasionally see images from there. It's just that we can only do this by breaking through the obstruction of that mysterious power. You actually have a way to deal with that mysterious resistance." The Empyrean fairy looked at him in amazement. Tang Zheng chuckled. Fortunately, it was the sky-swallowing technique that worked. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi both knew about the sky-swallowing technique. Tian Chanzi asked suspiciously, "As far as I know, the sky-swallowing technique is of little value to the demon race. I feel that your sky-swallowing technique is much more powerful and different from the demon races." Tang Zheng couldn't help but sigh at Tian Chanzi's shrewdness. He admitted, "There is a little difference." This was because after he obtained the second half of the sky-swallowing technique from the Langya Pavilion, the sky-swallowing technique had unknowingly changed. Of course, its power was much more powerful than the demon race's sky-swallowing technique. Tian Chanzi didn't care much about the demon race's techniques. He didn't continue to ask about the sky-swallowing technique and changed the topic. "You're the only one among us who can get close. Can we try again and see if we can see more images?" The Empyrean fairy also nodded in agreement. Tang Zheng was also quite tempted. He rested for a moment, accumulated his vital energy, and flew up again. This time, he directly used the sky-swallowing technique. Sure enough, the mysterious force appeared again, but it was immediately absorbed by the sky-swallowing technique. Tang Zheng once again arrived at the previous place. He opened his eyes wide, not letting go of any details, hoping to see more images. However, things didn't go as he wished. The wound on his face burst open again, and the clothes on his body were torn apart, revealing his strong physique. "Things didn't go as I wished. I can't see anything." Tang Zheng looked around and couldn't help but feel disappointed when he saw nothing. The strong wind blew, and he couldn't continue to persevere. He flew back with a depressed face and shook his head at their eager eyes. No, I can't see anything. The two couldn't help but feel disappointed. Tian Chanzi patted Tang Zheng's shoulder and comforted him. This is something that can only be encountered by chance. Since you've seen a little, it's enough for us to understand more about the sky beyond heaven. In fact, the images you've seen have already conveyed a lot of information. Tang Zheng's spirit was shaken, and he nodded. That's reasonable. At least we know that the sky beyond heaven is indeed a dangerous place as we previously speculated. It's not a good place. Those ferocious beasts and that giant bird are no pushovers. On top of that, that city is so vast that it's obvious that the outer sky is a much more powerful world. The natives of that world are far more powerful than us. The few of them didn't look too good. There were so many small and big worlds, and now that they found out that the strength of this world was so terrifying, of course, they couldn't be happy. They also finally understood why the demon race tried so hard to return. In that world, the demon race's life was probably not easy. Caillou also knew about the sky beyond heaven for the first time. He sighed. No wonder so many people never returned. They were probably killed by the natives of the sky beyond heaven. Tang Zheng felt regretful and said seriously, since the sky beyond heaven is so dangerous, and there are even stronger existences, the stairway to heaven can't be easily rebuilt. Otherwise, we won't only be facing the cultivators of our world, but also the natives of the sky beyond heaven. At that time, we'll be in trouble, and we might even cause a disaster to this world. Although Tian Chanzi was unwilling, he had to admit that Tang Zheng's words were reasonable. He didn't say a word, and tacitly agreed with Tang Zheng's decision. The Empyrean fairy looked at the sky deeply and said regretfully, I originally wanted to go to the sky beyond heaven to investigate, but now it seems that this plan is going to be ruined. Tang Zheng didn't think so, because he suddenly remembered Yang Qingyi's prophecy. In the prophecy, the stairway to heaven had been rebuilt. However, he also remembered Caillou's words. The stairway to heaven existed a long time ago. At that time, only the people of this world entered the sky beyond heaven through the stairway to heaven. Why didn't the people of the sky beyond heaven come through the stairway to heaven? After listening to Tang Zheng's question, Caillou was speechless for a moment. He couldn't find a conclusive answer and could only say, maybe there are some reasons that we don't know. Suddenly, Tang Zheng felt that more questions came to his mind, and he couldn't figure it out in a short time. He could only temporarily put it to the back of his mind. Tang Zheng, you're exposed. Suddenly, Tian Chanzi pointed at Tang Zheng's clothes, which were almost like strips of cloth, and said mischievously. Tang Zheng was embarrassed. He looked at the Empyrean fairy and Linger, and fiercely glared at Tian Chanzi. He quickly ran to the side to change his clothes. The few of them didn't continue to stay here. They looked at the peak of the mountain with complicated expressions and went down the mountain. After experiencing 3 different environments, they came to the foot of the mountain. When they looked back again, the peak of the mountain was covered in clouds and fog. It was impossible to see clearly. I've seen Mount Buzhou. One of my wishes has been fulfilled. Empyrean fairy said. Tang Zheng smiled bitterly and said, there's nothing to do in the 100,000 mountains. Let's go back to the capital. The few of them quickly shuttled through the dense forest. Tang Zheng's mind couldn't help but have images of the sky beyond heaven. His heart was unsettled. If the stairway to heaven is really reforged, then we must do our best to prevent the natives of the sky beyond heaven from coming to this world. Otherwise, this world will really suffer a disaster. Tang Zheng thought silently. Although he never wanted to be a savior, when he saw that this world was in danger, he almost subconsciously wanted to avoid that kind of situation. Perhaps this was inseparable from the education he received from his grandfather since he was young. His grandfather had always taught him to be a good person. He still maintained pure kindness in his bones. The few of them walked out of the 100,000 mountains, and the 100,000 mountains returned to silence. However, they didn't walk too far before they saw a few luxury cars parked by the side of the road. Long Shenyuan was actually sitting in the car. When he saw the few of them, He quickly got off the car and walked over to greet them. "Everyone, you're finally out. Quick, quick, get in the car. Don't be in a hurry to leave. You must let me do my part as a host." Long Shenyuan warmly invited. Although he was very curious about what Tang Zheng and the others were doing, he didn't dare to ask. Chapter 863. After pausing for a few days in Dianan, Long Shenyuan received him grandly. Linga's cooperation with the authorities had already been finalized, and she still had to stay in Dianan to film a promotional video for Dianan. Yi Yuan brought the elites of the witch clan and rushed to Dianan, protecting Linga's safety closely. As for the other staff members, they were repeatedly warned by Tang Zheng. Everyone realized the importance of Linga to their boss and protected her like a national treasure. However, there was another person who came with Yi Yuan, Lan Yu, Tang Zheng's mother. She missed her son and couldn't help but come with Yi Yuan. Although this was out of Tang Zheng's expectations, he did not say anything. According to Yi Yuan's report, everyone was doing well on the island, especially the old man, Tang Dahai. Although he was not used to it at first, he gradually became obsessed with cultivation and actually regained his vitality at the age of 70. His face was flushed red and his spirit was hale and hearty. Regarding this, Tang Zheng was very gratified. After Lan Yu saw her son, she almost never left his side. Tang Zheng was helpless and did not stop her. The knot in his heart was slowly unraveling, and he could treat his parents normally. The time spent together was always short. Even though Ling was reluctant to part, she could only watch as Tang Zheng and the others left. She still had a lot of work to do. After the few of them boarded the plane and returned to the capital, Tian Chanzi slipped away. Lan Yu was naturally brought to the villa. The villa had already been renovated, and the traces of the battle had long since disappeared. Actually, they could have moved out of this place, but everyone chose to stay. That battle had left a deep impression on them. Living here, they could constantly remind them of a sense of danger. A few great beauties came out to welcome them. Lan Yu's eyes were almost dazzled by them. When she was young, she was also a beauty, and now, she was even more charming. However, when she saw the few beauties with different styles in front of her, she was still dazzled. She couldn't help but look at her son. Although she liked Yi Wu the most, the corners of her mouth still curled up into a smile. She thought to herself that her son was great, to actually have the favor of so many girls. When Wu saw Lan Yu, he immediately stepped forward and bowed, calling out affectionately, "Mistress, why are you here?" Wu Pingchang's cold outer clothes were taken off, and she was just like an ordinary girl. Lan Yu held Wu's hand and said, "I missed you and Xiao Zheng, so I came to see you." As he spoke, he swept his gaze across the others. Other than Fang Shesha, the others did not know the relationship between Lan Yu and Tang Zheng, so they could not help but be curious, but they still politely nodded. Seeing that the atmosphere was a bit awkward, Tang Zheng hurriedly let everyone into the room. He didn't know how to introduce Lan Yu's identity, so he found an excuse to return to the study and let them interact with each other. The relationship between women could be established very quickly. In just a few words, everyone understood that this was Tang Zheng's mother. Immediately, everyone's mouths became even sweeter, especially Liu Qingmai and Nan Nan. One big and one small, it was as if they had crawled out of a jar of honey, making Lan Yu's heart burst with joy. An and Mu Hongyang were much more reserved. After all, An's identity was special, and Mu Hongyang was more mature and steady. They did not have that kind of ambiguous relationship with Tang Zheng. Mu Hongyang knocked on the door of the study and walked in. Seeing Tang Zheng sitting on the chair, she said, "Tang Zheng, your relationship with Aunt." She wanted to say something but hesitated. As smart as she was, of course, she could see that the relationship between the mother and son was not very harmonious. Moreover, Tang Zheng had never mentioned his parents before, which made her suspicious. Tang Zheng waved his hand and changed the topic. "Sister Mu, this time when I went to Dianan, I saw Nana's grandfather." Mu Hongyan's heart tightened, and she asked nervously, "Then you?" Obviously, she wanted to ask if there was a conflict between the two sides. Tang Zheng understood her thoughts, shook his head and said, "I have buried the hatchet with him." What happened in the past is written off. Tang Zheng did this more because he didn't want the mother and daughter to be caught in the middle. Mu Hongyang and Nana's importance to him was self-evident. They were not relatives, but they were more than relatives. Mu Hongyang heaved a huge sigh of relief, her tense body also relaxed, as if relieved of a heavy burden. That's good. Actually, Eunuch is not an unreasonable person. The reason why I left the Long family was more because of other people, and not Eunuch. He has always taken care of me and loved Nana very much. Tang Zheng nodded. It is because I know this that I chose to reconcile. Mu Hongyang reluctantly smiled. If other people heard this, they would think that he was bragging, but Mu Hongyang took care of Tang Zheng's business for him. She knew the power he had now. This was only the power in the business world. If it was in terms of force and invisible influence, it was the most terrifying. Tang Zheng, during the time you were gone, the Yang family and I have figured out the businesses we took over from the Song family and the Chu family, and have generally integrated them. Your judgment was right. The officials will not turn a blind eye. They did not leave us much time. Fortunately, we made the first move and gained enough benefits. Otherwise, we would not have such a big harvest. Mu Hongyang reported. Tang Zheng smiled faintly. Business was not his strong point, and he would not interfere. He gave full authority to Mu Hongyang to manage. Sister Mu, you can deal with these things carefully. You don't have to tell me everything in detail. Mu Hongyang laughed involuntarily. Only you will be so open-minded. You have handed over such a big business to me, and you are not afraid that I will replace you. Tang Zheng laughed. If Sister Mu likes it, you can take it away. These are all your credit. If there was no you, there would not be all of this. Mu Hongyang smiled sweetly. Of course, she would not really do this. In the next few days, Tang Zheng did not stop. The Yang family and Qin Batian personally came to visit. Tang Zheng knew that the Ye family had completely given up and did not go against them with great fanfare. Yi Xuanji had been in seclusion and did not come out. All the family matters were handed over to Yi Ku to take care of. It was very stable, and there were no mistakes. Song Yu seemed to have evaporated from the world and never appeared again. Tang Zheng did not put Song Yu in his eyes, but his heart moved. He remembered Ji Wuxiang and asked, "What has Ji Wuxiang done recently?" Yang Liuyun knew Tang Zheng's impression of Ji Wuxiang and hurriedly said, "His whereabouts have always been mysterious. We have tried to track him before, but we found nothing. This time is the same. I am afraid that he is the most erratic person in the capital." Tang Zheng was silent. Yang Liuyun suspiciously asked, "Are you looking for him?" Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "No, I am just curious." Ever since they met at the chess club, he always felt that Ji Wuxiang was hiding very deeply, far more unfathomable than what was on the surface. Therefore, it was only natural that he would pay attention to him. Now the situation in the capital has undergone earth-shaking changes. Tang Zheng's power is almost equal to the Yang family, and Qin Batian has caught up. He can even faintly compete with the Ye family. But these three forces are twisted into a rope and listen to Tang Zheng's orders. Therefore, the Ye family is trying to survive in the cracks. What is the official reaction? Tang Zheng asked again. The National Security Bureau and the Dragon Group have been abolished. I have not heard of any new similar organizations being established. On the surface, it is calm. Tang Zheng secretly nodded and asked, "What about the things they left behind?" "That is not clear. I guess the military will take over. After all, these years the National Security Bureau and the Dragon Group have been shining brightly, and the military is much weaker. They have long been dissatisfied with the big shots in the military. They will definitely take this opportunity to rise up." Tang Zheng pondered. If the military took over, then the military's strength will definitely increase greatly. After all, the National Security Bureau and the Dragon Group left behind many things, especially the research of the Dragon Group. Whether it is super soldiers or mechas, they are all treasures. Tang Zheng has always had a good impression of the military. Since they took over, then there is no need to pay attention to them for the time being. Without the interference of the Dragon Group, his relationship with the government will be greatly improved. At the same time, on top of a towering mountain, Song Yu and Qi Shuo were accompanied by another person. Song Yu brought the token and sword manual of the sword god back to the sword pavilion. He passed on the sword god's will, saying that the sword god had passed on the position of the sword pavilion master to him and that everyone in the sword pavilion must listen to his orders. In the sword pavilion, other than the 3 disciples of the sword god, there was only the sword slave. The sword slave did not have the right to speak, and the other disciple of the sword god, Qi Shuo, had limited intelligence. How could he be compared with the cunning Song Yu? Therefore, in a few words, the entire sword pavilion was taken in by Song Yu and treated him as the master. Song Yu immediately began to practice the 9th Heaven Galaxy Fall sword technique in the sword manual. In addition, he was also qualified to comprehend the other sword techniques of the sword pavilion. The sword pavilion collected many sword techniques from famous sects. These sword techniques were the spoils of war won by the sword god from time to time. In the beginning, every time the sword god challenged someone, he would take the opponent's most powerful sword technique after winning. Over time, the sword pavilion collected many powerful sword techniques in the world. The sword god then used these sword techniques to get rid of the dross and extract the essence. In the end, he comprehended his own set of unique sword techniques. Among them, Qi Shuo's Rising Sun sword technique, Zhen Shisan's 13 swords, and the 9th Heaven Galaxy Fall sword technique were the most powerful sword techniques that the sword god had comprehended. Song Yu was indeed innately intelligent and extremely talented. After comprehending these powerful sword techniques, he had mastered them through a comprehensive study. His power had increased greatly, and his attainments in sword techniques had increased day by day, soaring to the heavens. Although he still did not have the confidence to fight against Tang Zheng, he was confident that one day he would be able to fight against Tang Zheng and kill him to avenge himself and the Song family. But a sudden guest broke the peace of the sword pavilion. Song Yu actually recognized this person and had even interacted with her several times. This person was the holy maiden of the Li Palace, Li Xiaotian, who had always been at Tang Zheng's side. Li Xiaotian had already disappeared from the crowd for too many days, but Song Yu would never forget her. Back then, the Song family had always wanted to establish a relationship with the Li Palace. Song Yu was very surprised by Li Xiaotian's visit, but the other news that she brought shocked him even more. This news only had 4 words: "The Venerable Lord summons you." Song Yu and Qi Shuo did not know that the Azure Dragon Hall was behind the sword pavilion, but they had occasionally heard the 2 words Venerable Lord and knew what the Venerable Lord meant to the sword pavilion. Moreover, before the sword god died, he had repeatedly warned Song Yu about the Venerable Lord's power and told him to be respectful to the Venerable Lord. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,